Now I'm sitting in probably the biggest risk I have ever taken. It was literally only around 3 years ago where I decided to rebuild my first sort of crash damaged car, which was Hannah's Audi TT. And as the channel's grown, so has my confidence. You guys know I'm literally no mechanic. I'm learning as I go along, as most people do, but this one is really gonna push my abilities. Now, I already know what you're thinking. I get it every single time I buy a new car.
Why don't you finish all your other cars before you buy a new one?
Well, I'm not making excuses, but let me explain. The C63 is pretty much ready for paint, so that means it will sit in a body shop. It's pretty much the same story with the Range Rover. It also looks like the same story for the E46 M3, and I can't finish the GT86 until the Range Rover's on the road because that will tow the GT86. Can I just say that that is a terrible excuse for buying another car? I guess you're right, but turns out I just like cars. This is, or was, a 2019 Aston Martin Vantage. It's beautiful. Well, it's beautiful if you squint. As you can see, it's had a small front end knock, and well, I'm no genius, but the chassis seems to have moved in that direction. But as Aston Martin Vantages go, this was really cheap. Well, at least I think. The cheapest Aston Martin for sale in the UK right now is pretty much £90,000. That one is a complete Aston Martin though. This one was cheap for, well, quite obvious reasons. With the front end looking like this, with no headlights, damaged bonnet, and the chassis legs looking like this, it's categorised as a Category S, which means structural damage. But as you guys probably know by now from watching the channel, Category S cars can be put back on the road safely as long as they have an MOT test. Now, before I tell you how much I bought it for and what's exactly wrong with it, let me show you around it a bit. Now, underneath here is a 4-litre twin turbocharged V8 with 503 bhp. Look at those two turbos sitting nicely on top of the engine. Someone like me should definitely not own a car like this. It's got 19-inch super lightweight alloys, 6-pot brake calipers. It's British made. The doors open upwards. 2 keys, which is rare on a crash damaged car. The battery is completely flat, but it's got 14,000 miles on the clock. The rear end is kind of undamaged, and it looks so sick with this kind of ducktail spoiler. For a 2-seater coupe, it has really good boot space. And there's even room at the back here to put even more bags. The luxury of luggage storage. All the leather on the car feels amazing and really good quality. We've got carbon here and sort of like race style grab handles on the door cards. It's rear wheel drive. It does 0 to 60 in 3.6 seconds, a top speed of 195 miles an hour, and I still can't believe I bought one. There's one problem. Well, there's more than one problem, but it doesn't start. Now, I really cannot thank all you guys enough for giving me so much support throughout all these videos and this whole journey, and this wouldn't have even been possible without all of you watching. And after finishing off the 140i build, I wanted to push the content and myself to the next level, as I always try to. Okay, now we have the story of the car and all the sort of boring stuff out the way. We can get cracking on with trying to get this thing started and find out what's actually damaged.
It's another day to live another fairy tale.
So let me start off by saying there is absolutely nothing online about this car which is going to help me in the slightest when repairing it. Now, a lot of the time when I get stuck on something, a quick Google or a quick YouTube on how to do it normally solves the case, but with this, it's just not going to happen. Now, although there isn't much online about Aston Martins, there is a lot online about C63s. Now, why would that help me, you ask? Well, take a look at this. Although this car's had a final inspection by this chap here who works for Aston Martin, the engine and a lot of the stuff in this car was actually built by Mercedes. This is the same engine as the newer C63. So that means this car is absolutely flooded with, well, Mercedes part numbers and logos. And this is the Aston Martin key, but underneath the covering, it looks a little bit like this, which kind of looks a little bit like that. Pretty similar. Now, like my C63 and a lot of other cars that I've had, it does have a pyrotechnics fuse, which is here. And when the airbag's deployed, just like in this car, well, that fuse tends to blow just for safety reasons. And when the chap told me even with the jumper pack on it didn't start, well, that was my first thought. And that fuse is actually isolating that black cable, which tends to run directly to the starter motor. And I can see that the fuse is damaged because you can see here it's broken in the middle. So as I've previously done before, I've switched over the black cable over to the red cable, which constantly gets power, and then it should be able to start. Now, jumping that connection is exactly what I did when we went to go and collect the car to get it on the trailer, but still no luck. We get the ignition lights, but the car won't even crank. And because the car doesn't start, that means we can't get it out of park. So you're probably thinking, well, how the hell did we get it on a trailer? So shout out to Mark who went with me to recover the car. I've put his link in the description box below. But we did, as a team, manage to get this car on the trailer and get it back to Leicester. And Hannah seems to have taken a liking to it already. Now, as we couldn't get it out of park, so the rear wheels were locked up, these trays from Starbucks became super handy. We actually wedged them underneath the back wheels and then used the winch to drag it up onto the trailer. But getting it onto the pickup wasn't too hard. Getting it off, a different story. The only way we was going to get this car off is if we could get it into neutral. So I called Aston Martin, who are really helpful.
Take that out of there and put it in there. It should put it in neutral. Don't know how that works.
So the guy that I spoke to at Aston Martin Nottingham actually went to the workshop to show me photos of what screw I should undo and then where to put it afterwards. So I went underneath the Aston, located the gearbox, and then removed this Allen head screw and popped it into a different hole. It showed on the dashboard a parking lock fault, which sure enough meant that the car was stuck in neutral, so then we could roll it off the trailer. Now, as you can see, there's some pretty bad suspension damage to the front driver's side, so Mark was having to kick the wheel to keep it straight, as I had no control over that side of the car. But sure enough, we did it, and it was off and onto the ground. So still to the day, the car has sat here and not moved because we can't get it started, and it's just became a very expensive ornament. So since getting it on the ground, I did pop that Allen key screw back into the correct position to put the car back into park because I thought that it wouldn't start if the car was in neutral. Then I went ahead and started checking all the fuses on the car to make sure nothing had blown. From the positive wire on the battery here, I can see all of these cables have got power to them, and they just power all the electrics of the car. It's that black cable that's sending power to the starter motor. Now I found this in the middle, which is like a Vodafone tracker, which again, I don't know whether they could actually immobilize the car. I mean, they possibly could. It's probably worth giving these a phone call. Or the only other option I can think of is that it's got one of those ghost immobilizers on, which requires you to put like a special code in to start the car just because it prevents it being stolen, and there's no real way of me being able to find out whether it's got one of them on unless I got in contact with the previous owner. So if you're watching and you know the previous owner, let me know in the comment section, or please just drop me an email. So when you actually try and start the car, this is what happens. The car does have keyless start, but just to eliminate any problems with the keyless start, I'm popping the key into the ignition, which is actually in the center console. My foot is firmly on the brake, but when I turn the key, the ignition lights come on the dash, but nothing happens at all. Not even one crank of the starter. So I resorted to the Autel diagnostic tool. When the car was on the trailer and when I went to look at the car, I did plug in my diagnostic tool, but I was just getting communication faults between the OBD and the ECU. So maybe my diagnostic tool isn't compatible with the Aston Martin, but I was hoping that the Autel would be. So this is like the third time I've tried now, and it just won't read any codes from the ECU. There's no communication from the OBD port to the ECU. All of this just got me worrying. Did the guy sell it to me after buying it from auction and then found out that the engine is gone, or there's a problem with the ECU? So I just wanted to check the connections to the ECU first. Now the loom which goes to the ECU runs all the way down here, and then the ECU is literally just on the side of the engine there, but I can't see any brakes or anything obvious on why there's no communication between the battery and the OBD port to the ECU. The only thing that I can think of is maybe the diagnostic tool is probably too old, or it's not had an update, or you need a special tool to use on Aston Martins. So right now, all this damage is kind of the least of my worries. If I can't get this thing started, or the ECU is frazzled, then there would literally be no point in repairing it. So I resorted back to the only option and calling back up Aston Martin Nottingham. Yeah, so I'm wondering if you can help. I've got a registration here and I need to get a quote for a lot of the parts that I need as well, and the availability on them. Now, although Aston have been super helpful so far, I found out some interesting things, but they wanted me to bring the car in to check it over, but I didn't tell them it was crash damaged. Now, I've checked the oil in this car and it has oil, and underneath it doesn't seem to have any leaks, although there is no coolant in it, but that shouldn't stop it from starting. Now, so far, Aston Martin have been really helpful, especially the chap telling me how to get the car out of park and into neutral the mechanical way. But there is some stuff that they are pretty strict about. They don't want any Tom, Dick or Harry repairing one of their cars back on the road, especially with it having structural damage. So things like this chassis leg here, which is aluminium, it's actually called a crash can, and that's actually split just down the back there, which is okay because I think further back it is all right, but they're not allowed to actually sell me that because that is part of the safety structure of the car. They are allowed to sell me this, the radiators, bumpers and that sort of stuff, but anything to do with like the structure or the airbags, they're not allowed to sell me. The only places they are allowed to sell it to are registered Aston Martin repair centres, which quite obviously I'm not. But not to worry, I did suspect that this was going to be an issue before I bought it, and I did check with Aston Martin before I pulled the trigger, but I have a little plan around that. The problem I don't have a plan around with is that it won't start. So this was it. I was left worried and just unsure on what to do. There's probably a good reason that the chap bought it from auction and then resold it back to me on eBay. But then I got thinking back to how similar this Aston was to the Mercedes, which sprung an idea. Now, previously on the diagnostic tool, I've been selecting Aston Martin, which any normal person would. But this time I'm going to select Mercedes and choose the new C63S. So the diagnostic tool thinks it's scanning the new C63S, which is basically what engine is in the Aston. And so far, it does seem to be reading. So I've got my fingers crossed for this. Yes, so I think I've hacked the system here. Now I can read all the faults from the car. Literally, this car must have the same ECU as long as the engine as well as a C63S, because I can literally read everything, and this is what I couldn't do before. And the main thing that I think is the issue right here is the ECM. So if I go onto this fault here, and after selecting that, I came up with the screen which sprung a little bit of hope. This fault here said the engine start was blocked because of a crash event, so the starter does not run. And it says here that I should be able to reset this. I'm just hoping that this will work because the auto thinks it's communicating with a C63.
Come on.
Not an Aston Martin. I literally have no idea what I'm doing at this point, and I've never done any of this before, and I've never seen this screen before on auto. So I was just winging it as I go along with it, as I'm sure I'm going to have to do for a lot of this build.
What do I press? F1. Started. Turn the ignition off. Ah! And then back on. And then repeat the process.
If this works, come on. Nothing. I've got nothing again now. Okay, let's try and reset that crash sensor thing again if we can. But after going on to auto and then resetting it again, I think we had a breakthrough. We're moving in the right direction. Now we can put the foot on the brake. We get the red light and then listen. We get one kind of half crank and then nothing happens. Now I can only think that this is because the battery voltage is too low, but looking at here, it is about 11.9 volts, which isn't, well, 12 volts really, but maybe you need 13 volts to start it. I'm not quite sure. We've got a new battery with jumper cables onto the old battery, but perhaps I'm thinking I might need to put the new battery on or use the jumper pack. I'm yet to find out. Okay, so we've gone from new battery to the jumper pack. We've started this all up. We've got Chris for moral support now.
I'm here for good luck.
And
I'm gonna close your doors, otherwise it's bad luck.
well, that's not going to happen on this side, I'm afraid. No. Okay, so everything is reset. And let's see if we can do this. Okay, start engine, please. Okay, I admit it, what I did in the last video wasn't cool, it wasn't funny, and it was childish. But you can't say it wasn't entertaining. If you missed the video, then it's in the top right hand corner, but if you didn't, then you know that I risked it all on the most expensive rebuild that I've ever attempted to date, this 2019 Aston Martin Vantage. Oh god, is this going to be one hell of a rebuild, and we've already learned so much. In the last video I explained why I bought the Aston, where I bought it from, and how much I bought it for. And we managed to get it back here with a little bit of help from Aston Martin themselves, but my main concern, despite the damage on the front end, is that I bought this car as a non-runner. I thought the reason why it wouldn't start was to do with the pyro fuse, which is usually the case on a crash damaged car. This fuse normally breaks when the airbags blow out. But I've told you guys that a million times now. Here is the broken pyro fuse, which I jumped the connection from here over to here on, but still I had no luck. Nothing. Now we also learned that under the cover of pretty much all of these Aston Martin badges are, well, AMG badges. The engine and a lot of the parts on this car are from a newer C63, which helped me a lot when running the diagnostics on the car. When plugging in the diagnostic tool and running an auto scan, it scanned the car as an Aston Martin, but it didn't seem to get any communication with the ECU. But I manually override that and selected Mercedes C63, which it seemed to like. The diagnostic tool then brought up a fault regarding the crash data and gave me the option to reset it, which of course I tried. And after resetting it and trying to start it, we managed to get 1/2 of a crank. I picked up a jumper pack, connected that to it, and you know what? Roll the clip. We can do this. Okay, start engine, please. Yeah! Yeah! We're moving and we started resetting it. It is basically a Mercedes. Come on, we've got a running Aston Martin Vantage now, and it sounds sick. What a relief, one running Aston Martin. Oh my god, if only you guys could feel the relief that I felt when this thing started up, and I still feel relieved, but also so excited now this thing is running. Now actually, inside the expansion tank, there is no coolant, so we can't actually run this for too long. Which means we've got a coolant leak somewhere, which doesn't surprise me because the front contains a lot of radiators, which, well, has taken a fair amount of the hit. Now I've since found that the Aston has 3 driver settings. S for Sport, which is your standard setting. You then have Sport Plus, which opens the exhaust valves, and you also have Track, which I'm not sure what it does, but it changed the look of the dashboard and the exhaust sounds incredible. V8 twin turbo madness. The dash is going crazy. It does not want me to rev this. Now that we know the Aston starts, we can deep dive into it and find out what parts that we need and what parts that we can and can't order from Aston Martin. So remember, Aston Martin can't sell us everything unless we're a registered Aston Martin repair centre, which quite obviously we're not. But one thing that we can pick up from any local parts place is a battery for it. So that's the first thing I'm going to be replacing. The battery's in a pretty fiddly place right behind the driver's seat, and you have to remove the fuse box just to get to it. But all in all, it's a pretty easy job. Now just before I start the car, I wanted to put a little bit of water in there just to see if it held it. But no, it came straight out. So it looks like we're starting this thing without any coolant again. Now the next step is to get the Aston from outside and into the unit so we can begin rebuilding it. And there's only one small issue, and that is that one wheel does not turn with the steering, as you can see here. So I kind of had to improvise. And just before I pulled it into the unit, I noticed this. This sort of clear film which is over the paint here is called paint protection film. So the previous owner obviously looked after it, and it should have protected the paint pretty well. So before I brought it into the unit, I wanted to give it a quick wash with the MA detailing stuff. Right, now we need to figure out how to get this thing in the unit. So we've got the Aston just about in the door of the unit. And then we have to give a shout out to Malibu Performance for letting us steal the wheel skates. You can put them underneath the wheel, jack the wheel up, and then just slide the car around. It's as easy as that. Now the Aston's going to be going on the smaller blue ramp because we have the Lamborghini in the big ramp, which is, well, fairly poorly to say the least. But we'll get onto that in a future video. Okay, so finally the Aston is touched home inside the unit and we can begin the actual rebuild. The one thing that I want to start off with is to figure out why this wheel is, well, not connected to anything. And I have suspicions that maybe there's a broken track rod end in there, but let's get this wheel off and we'll investigate further, and then we can start stripping this car to bits and find out what we need to buy for it. Oh my god.
Is that light?
They are so light. This is the lightest wheel, 19-inch wheel I've literally ever felt. It is, oh my days. They've got to cost a fortune. And they're looking good nick as well, so could be onto a winner there. So, as I suspected, we have a broken inner tie rod. The actual track rod end seems okay and the ball joint seems fine. We just have snapped off the inner tie rod, which is pretty lucky actually because all the suspension arms look okay, and I can't imagine the suspension arms being cheap. The brake disc looks okay, the brake pads are good, the caliper's good. It looks in really good nick actually, but just the inner tie rod to replace. So I got straight on the phone to the local parts shop to see if they can order an inner tie rod for the Aston Martin. And whilst I waited for them to get back to me, I started stripping apart the rest of the damaged parts on the front. Now during this time they actually gave me a call back to say that they can't get an inner tie rod for an Aston Martin, no one lists them. So it's a main dealer only part. So I had to call Aston Martin.
Thank you for calling Aston Martin Nottingham.
It's a front inner tie rod, it's the driver's side, the other side.
Pretty confident that's not sold separately.
Oh.
So I'll double check for me now. Yeah, so the cap is separate.
Right.
But the rest of that is all the rack. And the rack on one of these is £5,880, 13 pence plus the VAT.
Jesus Christ, okay.
Right.
Cheers mate.
Okay, thank you.
Bye. Okay, so we've got a first problem here. So yeah, you heard it right. Aston Martin don't sell an inner tie rod separately. You have to buy the full steering rack. So I went ahead and started removing the inner tie rod just to see if I could see any part numbers that were on there. I was hoping that if I could find a part number, I could maybe compare it to something that they used on another car. And when I got the inner tie rod off, there was some numbers which were stamped on there. And if these numbers didn't work, I was just going to measure the inner tie rod and see if I could find one similar. But literally, I think after about 5 minutes of Googling that part number, I think we've found one. Just from a quick Google of the little part number that was on this inner tie rod, it seems they use the same inner tie rod, well I hope they use the same inner tie rod as a Jaguar XF. So I'm going to call up the parts place now with an XF registration, order an inner tie rod, and then fingers crossed that will work.
My God. Can't take my eye off you.
So that's one Jaguar XF inner tie rod on order, which costs £16. We just have to wait now to see if it fits. The next step is to start stripping apart this whole front end, get all the damaged parts off so we know exactly what next we need to order. Now there's a lot of parts which make up this front end, and I've got a feeling that we might not be able to cross-reference all of them because a lot of them will just be specifically made for the Aston Martin. But we'll see how we get along.
See behind that broken smile. Nice, sweet, smooth, like cocoa bread.
Now it's safe to say we've definitely repaired worse. And if this was an Audi, a Volkswagen or a BMW, this would be a nice, quick and easy job. It's just the fact that it's an Aston Martin, and that's what's going to be the hard part about this whole build. Okay, so I think it looks a lot worse than it actually is, but you can see why these cars actually get written off. Now, we are slowly getting there. There's still a lot more damaged parts that need to be taken off, like the arch lining and the bonnet, and there's also a wing that's damaged on the other side as well. But we've slowly started stripping apart the front end. But an accident damage repair centre, if they were going to repair this under like insurance circumstances, they'd have to replace everything like for like OEM. So example, that inner tie rod that we just spoken about, that couldn't be replaced with the Jaguar XF tie rod, although it is exactly the same. Well, we hope it's exactly the same. They'd have to get a steering rack from Aston Martin, which we all know is £5,800 plus VAT, then the labour cost to fit it, and then that's just even the start of things. You've got the rest of this to sort of go on with. Here is another perfect example here. Remember the pyrotechnics fuse, which at the minute we're bridging this sort of circuit across so we can get it started? Well, this thing is here. Now, if you remember in the first episode, I told you that Aston Martin won't actually sell to the public parts which are to do with safety, like the crash cans on the front and some parts with the airbag. They will only sell those parts to an Aston Martin registered repair centre, just because they want their cars to be top notch when they're back on the road and not repaired by, well, someone like me. But I did call them regarding a pyro fuse, but it comes as a whole unit like this, and this thing from Aston Martin is £560. And this is kind of annoying because we don't actually need that full part, we only need this little fuse here. Well, I actually managed to find that full pyro fuse kit on eBay secondhand for £289.99, which is still pretty expensive, and we only need that fuse part. But again, we're using our brain here, and on the actual pyrotechnics fuse, the actual part that we need, there is a small part number, and that part number relates to a fuse which is also used on Audi Q5s, Maseratis, BMW 3 Series, 5 Series, 6 Series, 7 Series, and the best bit about it, you can buy it separately off eBay for £27.99. We've just got to hope that all these cross-referenced parts all work, and we won't know that until they turn up. Now, there's a fair few damaged radiators on the Aston Martin. The one in front of the passenger wheel isn't leaking, but it is damaged, and the oil cooler in front of the driver's wheel seems okay. But the rest of the radiators and the aircon rads, well, they seem to have taken a bit of a beating. The main radiator here, which is huge, looks okay, but at the bottom it's actually leaking coolant. So we're gonna have to order one of these. And just to keep track of all the parts and the expenses on this build, I've got myself a blackboard and a special shout out section on the side for people that help me out, like Mallory Performance with the wheel skates and Aston Martin with telling me how to knock the car into neutral without starting it. Now, there's another huge question here, and that is the chassis bent? And if it is, the build is going to get that much more expensive. Now, pretty much most of the chassis on this is aluminium and unboltable, which is why I had a fair amount of confidence in this, but I won't really find out the good or bad news until I remove these front crash cans. And the news is good. Well, it's good so far. So this is what they call a crash can. This is a sort of crumple zone. This bit here is designed to sort of squash up when involved in a front end accident, but I don't think the impact was really that way. It was more of a that way accident, and in this instance it sort of broke away from the weld, but it's a good job it has broke away from the weld, because if that weld held up, then we could be talking a lot more damage than we originally thought. So this is where the crash can bolts to, on that side and on that side, and because it broke away from the weld, I'm thinking that this part should still be in a straight line. If that weld held up, then it could have pushed it all to one side, but you can see there's a lot of brace in here which is all straight. This is an unboltable part as well, and there's no kinks, there's no bends or anything in that. So as far as I can see from my eyes, this is all in a straight line, and all this aluminium sort of subframe is all unboltable, but you're talking like engine out job to change it. But again, I'm no professional and I don't claim to be, so saying that the car's not been knocked out of geometry just by looking at it by eye would be like a silly claim. So it's definitely going to go and have an alignment when everything's all bolted back together, but actually by looking at it, it really doesn't look that bad. I think it's going to be little parts like this broken piece here that's going to end up jumping up and biting me, because we can't cross-reference that to another car, and well, it's an Aston Martin only part because it's only made for this chassis, and well, we all know how Aston Martin prices go. And also, from such an amazing response from the last video, which I can't thank all you guys enough for watching the video, liking it and sharing it, and also if you're new here and you've recently subscribed, welcome aboard. The previous owner of the Aston Martin actually reached out to me, and we have the photos from the accident. It's been a long time coming, but oh yes, is it going to be worth it? As we've discovered, finding parts for a 2019 Aston Martin Vantage isn't one of the easiest things in the world. This Vantage came free with a damaged front end, a damaged bonnet, a lot of damaged radiators which we took off in the last video, a damaged wheel arch lining, and both airbags deployed. But looking on the bright side of things, I bought this car as a non-runner and we actually managed to get it started without spending, well, pretty much any money. And in the last video, I started stripping apart the front end to find out what's damaged and what isn't damaged, and we found out parts are a little harder to find than we first thought. Take this inner tie rod as an example. When I bought the car, we found that the inner tie rod had completely snapped. The inner tie rod is the part that connects the steering rack to the track rod end, which allows the wheel to steer when turning the steering wheel. Now, nobody else could get an inner tie rod for an Aston Martin, so we had to call Aston Martin directly. They said they wouldn't sell them separately. They only come as a full steering rack, which was around £5,800.
£5,880.13.
There is no way I'm paying £5,800 just for a steering rack, which I just need the inner tie rod for. So I looked at the steering rack, found a part number on it which matched to a Jaguar XF inner tie rod. Which brings me to this situation. So this tie rod is off a Jaguar XF, and although it does thread into the steering rack and also it threads into the track rod end, it is just too short to what the actual tie rod off the Aston Martin is. Now this inner tie rod right here is off a Focus ST, and it is the right length, it's just the pitch on the thread is just not quite right. Now this one is off a Mercedes C-Class. This was £14, and this does thread into the track rod end. It is a little bit longer than the Aston Martin one, but we can trim it down, and it does thread into the steering rack-ish. Now this tie rod is all the way into the steering rack, and you can still see a gap between the actual tie rod and the steering rack. And if you look at the passenger side, well, it's completely flush against the steering rack. So the actual steering rack end is just not quite the same. And for me, I'm not willing to take a risk on something so vital as the steering. So on this certain part, I seem to have taken a loss on trying to avoid Aston Martin tax. Or have I? I have been shopping. Look at all the parts that we have here. Now I've got to do a huge shout out for so many of you that have reached out to try and help me find parts for this Aston Martin. And we've had breakers yards, race teams, and even people that used to work for Aston Martin try and help me with this. But most of this stuff here came from Cinetic, who are like a car auction / breakers yard who are breaking an Aston Martin Vantage. And I managed to grab some of the scraps off it, including the inner tie rod. So a huge shout out to Craig from Cinetic, who reached out and told me about the Aston Martin that they had breaking, and the second-hand tie rod set me back £100. So Cinetic gets added to the blackboard, and you can see here just how close we were of dodging that Aston Martin tax. It's just a tiny bit too short on the Jaguar XF inner tie rod. All that's left to do now is to fit the second-hand inner tie rod to the Aston Martin, and it's just a simple case of screwing it into the steering rack and then screwing it into the track rod end. Now the car will need to have its wheel alignment done afterwards, but just as a rough guess, we're just measuring it with a tape measure for now. Now, although we didn't save loads of money on this inner tie rod, we still managed to save a bit buying it second hand. But with this next part, I think we're about to save a fair bit of money. And that is this part right here, which is the pyrotechnics fuse. Now, this is a fuse which all of you guys know by now, which breaks when the airbags deploy. And you can just see the break in it at the bottom there. Now, from Aston Martin, they want you to buy this whole piece here, which includes the pyrotechnics fuse, and the fuse actually sits between this bit and that bit there. Aston Martin again want around 580 quid for that full pyrotechnics fuse sort of thingy-majig. Now I found that full bit that Aston Martin wanted to sell me on eBay exactly the same for around 280 quid, which still seemed a little bit steep for just, well, a pyrotechnics fuse. So I actually looked at the part number on the back of this and found this, which is off a Volvo. Now this pyro fuse off a Volvo cost me £27.99, and it looks pretty much identical to the one that's came off the Aston. And I have no reason to believe why it wouldn't work, so let's fit it. So the reason the pyro fuse breaks in the first place when the airbags deploy is in case the accident is that bad that it causes a fire. And the pyro fuse is just there to cut power going directly to the engine. So obviously with that broken, the car won't start up. But we've learned by taking the pyro fuse off and jumping the cable over to the main electrics on the car, we can actually start it. But this isn't really a long-term fix and it's quite dangerous to keep it like that. So hopefully with this new Pyrotechnics fuse, we should be back in action. And this one, which just came off a Volvo, fits quite snug and exactly the same as the Aston Martin one fit. Okay, so that is a new pyro fuse on the car. I'm hoping that it works, but we can't actually test to see if it works or not because, well, we don't have a front end on the car, and starting it, well, it just cause havoc. Now, so far, we're not actually doing so bad on the parts side of things. But there is a few things, well, mainly one thing that I still cannot get. It seems to be as rare as anything, and believe me, I've searched everywhere for it. So let me show you the part that is impossible to find. The dashboard. Now, as the passenger airbag has blown, it's ripped a huge hole in the dashboard and it's also smashed the windscreen as well. Now, this dashboard is impossible to find. And not only have I got to find one, I've also got to find one which is leather and red stitching to match the rest of the interior. Now, there's a company out there that offers a package where they'll replace the driver's side airbag, the passenger side airbag, and they'll also retrim the dashboard for you. And it's around $3.5 grand. The only issue with that is after sending them all the parts, it can take up to 6 weeks for them to refurbish the dashboard, and by then I would have forgot how the whole thing goes back in. So instead, I'm gonna go at this myself and I'll explain why as I'm taking out this dashboard. This is gonna be one hell of a journey. Now, if this actually works, I could end up saving again a lot of money. So as you guys know, my only option at the minute is to send the dash off to get refurbished with all the airbags, which is £3,500. But I can buy a brand new passenger side airbag from Aston Martin for £400 and a second-hand steering wheel airbag for also £400. Then it's just the case of getting the dashboard repaired. Now, I spoke to a few people and they seem to think that they can repair the dashboard and retrim the leather. Problem is, I've got to get it out first. Now, every other car I've took a dashboard out of, I've always had a new dashboard ready to go in, which makes it a lot easier to remove the dashboard because I can see on the new dashboard where all the bolt holes are which hold it to the actual car. And now, as we don't have that on the Aston Martin, this is going to be really tricky.
I ain't have that many friends, I would do anything just to fit in.
Look at me, taking chances, I might have to slow.
There's absolutely nothing online or any help which tells you how to remove this dashboard. So what you're seeing right now is me trying to figure it out as I go along, which is usually the case anyway. But when it's the case with £100,000 worth of car, I'm quite nervous to break anything in the process. And I'm also nervous to remember where everything goes when I put it back together again. Now, my sort of first obstacle is to get the clock spring off and the stalk with the indicators and the wipers on, because there's no way a dashboard is coming out with them on. But I managed to figure that one out myself. The next step is the center console. I've got to remove this so I've got room to pull the dashboard out when I finally get all the bolts out from it. And all the bolts on this center console were completely hidden. They were so hard to find. Don't know what trims are held in by clips and what trims are bolted in. So I was being as careful as I possibly could.
Why do you give me a hug?
Okay, I'll be honest with you guys, I'm absolutely struggling with this. The thing we've got to do is actually get this climate control out and get the fans out, but we can't do that until the center console comes out. I've undone every bolt imaginable in this center console and still could not find why it wasn't coming out until now, where I pulled this little sort of like knee brace off here, where there's an electrical connector on the back. This slides off, and the funny thing is with this, if we have a look, there's a Citroen and Peugeot badge on the back of this electrical connector. So not only have we got Mercedes, AMG, we've now got Citroen and Peugeot. And to be honest, I kind of prefer the Mercedes side of things. Anyway, behind that, there is, that was loose. So that one was loose. Okay, we're blaming Citroen and Peugeot for that one. These are the last 2 bolts now to take the center console out. But another thing that's questionable is why is there electrical connectors on the side of like knee support things? Oh my God, it's came out. Well, it's moved further back. There's going to be a lot of electrical connectors behind this because of that. But I think we only need to move it back. Now my celebrations were short-lived because I got the center console out. I thought I was on the home straight, but there was still even more to undo. I got the climate control out, the fans out, and also all the computers for the stereo. But no matter how many bolts that I actually undone, the dash still was not coming out. There was like bolts hidden somewhere which were holding it in. Please let there be bolts underneath this. It felt as if the dashboard was being held towards the back of the windscreen. And I was hoping underneath this speaker here, there'll be one big bolt holding it in. But unfortunately, there wasn't. So I resorted to calling Aston Martin. I am in the process of stripping the dash out at the moment. And I've got literally near enough everything out, but I just still can't seem to get the dash from the actual body of the car. It feels like something is bolted towards the windscreen side.
What I do know is that we actually have a special tool to move dashes. Just give me a second. I'll speak hold on. One of the texts.
Oh, legend. Thank you.
Hold on a minute.
So that was not what I wanted to hear. A special tool for removing a dashboard. Is this where I'm going wrong?
Hello. Right, so what I was just chatting to James about is he's saying the reason why it might be difficult is because when you have to remove the whole dash, it's really heavy. A couple of people even do.
Oh gee, so even all this like aluminium, like cast aluminium.
Yeah, that's all part of it.
Wow.
It's why we have people for it. But it takes the burden off the weight.
What? That is insane. Okay. Okay, so here's the thing. All signs are leading to that we have to take that full aluminium sort of mechanism out with the dashboard attached to it to get the dashboard out. And there's other news. Now, I've got money on that there was literally only going to be about a handful of people that have ever taken an Aston Martin Vantage 2019 dashboard out. There's probably a lot of people that have put one in, but never taken one out. But I want to be one of them. So I'm determined to do this rather than taking it to Aston for them to do it, which would be extortionate. And it just seems so stupid that you have to remove this full aluminium frame just to take out this sort of top skin. It just doesn't make sense. So right now we've got the guys from Screensaver, Nuneaton, shout out to those guys. They're going to be coming down to remove the windscreen. The windscreen is damaged and will need replacing anyway, but I'm hoping with the windscreen removed, I might be able to see just underneath the dashboard there and see if there's any other way that I could get that thing out without having to take that full aluminium shell out of there. So just to make the guys at Screensaver's job a little bit easier, me and Hannah started removing the damaged bonnet, which has got to be removed anyway. And with that removed, the guys can come in and start attacking the wiper blades and all the plastic shroud which surrounds the windscreen. They then use their special tool which breaks the windscreen seal with this sort of wire, and then after that they can lift the windscreen out to hopefully revealing some sort of easier way of getting the dashboard out. Right, the windscreen is out. Hasn't revealed any bolts, which makes it a little bit easier to remove the dashboard. No. That has literally not helped us one bit. The only good side is that we've got a bit more light to work in there and a bit more room, but there is literally no bolt. Everything sits really flush against it, and I mean, it's not coming out. It is definitely all connected to that aluminium frame. Now, I think we've got two options here. Well, I hope we've got two options here. Now, this part of the dashboard right here, you can see it is all one piece, but the leather is sectioned off into almost two pieces. And the original plan is obviously to fix this part here and retrim it. Now, if this can be done whilst it's in the car, that means we're gonna have to get this passenger side airbag out from underneath. If we can do that and it can be retrimmed in the car, that is going to be an absolute winner. And then option 2, which I really am dreading, is we have to do what Aston Martin said we have to do and remove all of this aluminium frame and everything and lift the whole dashboard out, and apparently it is really heavy. I'm hoping we don't have to do that. Not only that, Aston Martin use a dashboard crane to remove the dash, and we definitely don't have one of those. Now with the wheels on, you literally just wouldn't recognize this car as an Aston Martin. The front end is just completely gone, and I don't even know anymore. So far we've found AMG badges, Mercedes badges, Citroen and Peugeot badges, and I've also managed to fix stuff using Volvo parts. And that is all on an Aston Martin. Now this once was the cheapest 2019 Aston Martin Vantage in the UK. And actually, I can confirm that it still is. If we look at the Aston Martin Blackboard of Truth, we have only spent £307.99 repairing this thing so far. But that was until today. Now we did make some progress in the last video. One progress being that all 4 wheels now point in a straight line. This is thanks to a brand new second-hand tie rod that we managed to find off an Aston Martin which was being broken for parts. But the issue we had and still have is the dashboard. This is the current state of the interior for the Aston Martin, and this is all because we need to replace the dashboard because the passenger side airbag has blown. Now for someone who's not a mechanic, I've managed to wing it with previous dashboards before, but it seems with the Aston Martin one, you're gonna have to have a bit of skill. Now, as I've mentioned, I don't have a new dashboard to go into the Aston Martin. What I was gonna do is replace the passenger side airbag, get this part repaired, and then re-levered over the top of it. But to do that, I need to remove the dash. And this is just not coming out despite the many bolts and electrical connectors that I've undone. And according to Aston Martin, we have to remove this full aluminium frame, and they use a dashboard crane to actually pull this thing out. So this is definitely not going to be an easy job. As you can see here, here's the special crane that they use at Aston Martin to fit the full dashboard in place. And quite obviously, I don't have one of those in my workshop. So it looks like it's just me versus the dashboard. But I'm hoping we can work our way around that later on in the video. But for now, I want to sort of crack on with the exterior side of things. Now there's still a lot of damaged parts on the front of the Aston Martin that we need to remove before we can start rebuilding the front end of it. Now the Aston has sort of 2 arch linings. There's an inner carpet lining and then this outer fiberglass lining which actually holds the headlights as well. Now we managed to buy all of this as the old ones are damaged from Synetic with a sort of package deal. But what I'm trying to get to now is not the arch lining. It's actually the bonnet hinge you can see here. In my past experience, I've noticed when a car gets damaged to the bonnet, it sometimes bends the bonnet hinges. And when you fit a new bonnet, it's almost impossible to line up. So I'm not going to risk it with the Aston. And I've actually bought some new bonnet hinges to go along with the new bonnet that we'll need as well. But to access the bonnet hinges, you need to undo this little wing on the side here. But now you can see I can access the bonnet hinge, which also has a lower hydraulic strut on as well, which was quite interesting. And that lower strut is for actually holding the door up when it's open. Now it's onto the passenger side, which seems to be the worst side here. We've got broken brackets on the front, along with broken radiators, arch lining, and who knows what else. And here you can see that passenger side wing, which is just broken off on the top right hand corner. And when I first got the car, I didn't realise that this wing was 2 separate pieces. So that saves me replacing this whole wing because it's just a separate part. Now maybe from watching my videos, you've got the itch to go out and buy a crash damaged car. Or maybe it's completely put you off buying a crash damaged car. Now, before we get onto the cosmetic side of things, we've still got a lot of mechanical side of things to cover, and right here is pretty much the full front end that we managed to grab from Cinetic in the last video. Now, you can see the sort of Aston Martin is built in sections, and part of the section is missing. And if you remember from the first video where we picked up the car, the whole front end with the crash cans were all bent all over to one side. Now, this is what I mean by a crash can. So this sits on front of the chassis right there, and this is supposed to be like a crumple zone for when you're involved in an accident. Now, as this crash can is actually part of the structure of the car and it's sort of like a safety feature, Aston Martin won't sell it directly to the public. They will only sell this crash can or crash cans to an Aston Martin registered repair centre. So I've actually been really lucky to be able to grab the crash can here and a crash can there off a Aston Martin which had been broken for parts, because really they're going to be like gold dust. And it is really quite interesting to see how this all bolts together. It is really all in sections. You've got the front section from the crash cans forward, you've then got this section here which holds all the suspension, and then that bolts to this section right here which is the whole chassis, I assume. And the complexity of it doesn't stop there. There is loads of radiators and cooling which go on this Aston Martin, but let me explain that whilst I'm putting it together. Let's do this. So the only radiator or cooler that sort of stayed intact in the accident was this oil cooler just in front of the driver's side wheel. So that's the one thing I'm going to be keeping when swapping over the rest of this front end. Now, attached to this front end that we're bolting on now is another radiator in front of the passenger side wheel well. Now, yes, there are companies out there that can re-core radiators. So you can basically take your radiator to the repair shop and they'll re-core the center of it. But unfortunately, but not surprisingly, they couldn't do the Aston Martin ones. But lucky enough for me, I've managed to get hold of a full radiator pack, so it's not that much of an issue. So I'm now bolting up the old oil cooler onto the new front end, and there's a lot of other bolts to do up which mount the front end to the rest of the car as well. And with that front part fitted with the crash cans, we can now begin to fit the rest of the radiators. You've got one big main radiator here, which is for the engine coolant to cool the actual engine down. This radiator has the same fittings as a C63, being that it is a C63 engine, so there's no surprise there. And then in front of that radiator goes the aircon condenser, and just in between the main radiator and the aircon condenser is another radiator. I believe that radiator is a separate cooling system used for the charge coolers and the two turbos on this engine. And to top that off, there's another smaller radiator which sits on top of that, which is I think a secondary one for the engine. And not forgetting the one in front of the passenger side wheel, which I believe is for the gearbox to cool that down. Okay, we're making progress now. I've added about half a meter onto the front of the car now, and it just looks so weird and so long, but I guess this is all for sort of like weight distribution. The engine is behind the front wheels, so it's sort of like a front mid-engine car, and then we've got a lot of weight here on the front, but I guess it's all just to balance it all out. But now we have the radiator pack on, and we've got all the bonnet latches as well. Now, to put coolant in, as you can imagine, with it being an Aston Martin, it's not just the case of topping it up and letting it run itself. So as I probably mentioned, this expansion tank holds the coolant for the engine coolant, and all these lines go through here, round into this radiator right there, and then through the engine to keep it nice and cool. Now, if we're going to top coolant up in that, we can't just pop it in, it needs to be vacuum filled, and I'll explain why we're not doing that just yet. And then we have this expansion tank right here, which is a separate cooling system for the two turbos here, which have got charge coolers there, and also the gearbox, which is located at the back of the car, so you can imagine the long coolant lines which run underneath the car. This also cools the gearbox down as well. So even though that's just a small expansion tank, I can still imagine it taking a lot of coolant, because there's going to be lines running from the front all the way to the back. And again, this is going to have to be vacuum filled to prevent any airlocks, and I'll explain what I mean by that, as I mentioned, later. Next up, we're onto the bonnet hinges. There's 3 10mm bolts holding this onto the frame of the car, and then the hydraulic struts as well. It's a pretty simple job when you can access it. And once you've got that off, on goes the new ones, which look exactly the same as the old ones. But you never know whether they've got the tiniest little bend in, which could really affect the way the bonnet sits. Now we're going on with the arch linings.
Was cut in the cradle, what's up? Only right that I do it. Colossal until I'm a fall, so they want me to fail. Look, we prevail.
A lot of you ask, how do I know where everything goes back together and how do I know what bolts go where? Well, these little postage bags, which are labelled up by myself, seem to help. Although my handwriting isn't the best of things. But I can understand it, so I guess that's all that matters. Finally, we're on with the 2 air boxes and then the cold air intake on the front.
From nothing to something I'll never be. Tycoon and I'm Dre with the thizzle face. I'm nothing my section has ever seen. Run the ice so I'm clutch, I don't need a screen. I'm Curry, I stitch it from 30 deep. Do the pin in the pad like a surgery. She the curve at you just to flirt with me. Totally tucked out, but the jewels out.
Now everything is all back on mechanically now. Air boxes are on, radiators are on, and it's time now for all the sort of cosmetic and the body parts. Now everything that I bought up to this point has been from Cinetic, and the total of those parts being £2,210. So far I don't think we're actually doing so bad. I think around £2,500 to get to this stage, although it does still look a mess, but that is until this point right now. So what you're seeing right here is £8,500 worth of front end. Now that may sound expensive, but really when you break all these parts down, it's not actually too bad. And me being me, where there's a chance to upgrade, I've upgraded. So just an example, this badge alone, which sits along the front bumper, is £360 if you bought it separately. I bought this full thing as a sort of package deal, and well, you guys let me know whether I got a good deal or not. Let me show you. So all of this stuff here has came from an Aston Martin race team, and when you've got race team stuff, that means you've got carbon fiber stuff, and I just couldn't help myself but grab extra little bits and bobs to upgrade the Aston Martin whilst I was there. For example, this is a big carbon fiber sort of bonnet vent, which is cut out here, which was on a race car. Obviously, this thing is not painted because race teams tend to sort of wrap the cars instead of paint it. I don't know, is it lighter? I'm not too sure. We've managed to get a front bumper as well, which is unpainted, the front splitter, and loads more carbon fiber bits like this, which is actually that part on the front wing, which we need to replace. And well, now we've got a carbon fiber front wing. Not only that, there's even more stuff in here. Along with all the carbon fiber stuff, I managed to find some carbon fiber wing mirrors, which was kicking around the workshop as well. I asked if I could nick that. They said yes. We've also got a full wiring loom for the front, including all the parking sensors and the camera. We've got a carbon fiber rear diffuser to match all the rest of the carbon fiber stuff. And then in here are headlights, but we'll get onto them. So although this stuff does seem expensive, when you add it up all together, I think it does come a lot higher than £8,500. But there was one thing that I went a little over the top with. Now they had all of this carbon stuff, but the one thing that they didn't have carbon was this front splitter here, which just was a regular gloss black, and that is such a sort of iconic piece on the Aston Martin. It's like such a standout thing on the front end, and I thought, well, if we've got all the carbon fiber bits, I need a carbon fiber front splitter. But that's where I managed to find this thing here, a carbon fiber front splitter and full grille surround, and this was from astonmartinbits.com or .co.uk. This was really expensive and I didn't want to buy it, but I felt I had to, and this was £1,200. So with me going on a mass shopping spree and buying carbon parts that I didn't need, it brought the total cost so far to £12,217.99. But I just can't help myself upgrading parts where they need to be upgraded. They don't really need to be upgraded, really. Well, yes they do. They do need to be upgraded. But right now I'm just assembling the front bumper, which includes the front grille and the parking sensors, and of course that carbon fiber front splitter. And I'm pretty sure Aston Martin used a nicer assembly bench than what I did. With that all assembled, I can line it up to the car and just sort of loosely bolt it on. We're not going for anything exact at the moment. And what a difference a front bumper can make. Next up, we're onto the bonnet with those huge vents in them. The vents have like a carbon skin which sits underneath them. Then I've just got to transfer all the locks and the cables and the heat covers off the old bonnet onto the new one. Oh my god, look at that, what a transformation already. The car is looking kind of complete, well, more complete. This bonnet is basically the whole front of the car, and it sort of just dominates the front end with this front bumper as well, and then that carbon splitter. I just think this carbon here, and then also matching with the carbon sort of bonnet vents, looks so good, but I just don't think they're going to pop nicely with the black. So perhaps a full colour change for the Aston, I don't know. Now, it's looking so much better already, but there are a few things that will need touching up here and there. So right now the panel fitment isn't quite Aston Martin spec, maybe more Range Rover spec. The difference between the bonnet and the bumper is quite big. I definitely don't think you should be able to fit a finger between that gap, but there is adjustments for the bumper underneath here which allows you to sort of raise that gap up and tighten it all up, but that's something we could do later on. Definitely at the back here it's not quite right. There's a lip between the bonnet and also the door. We can get that sort of inch perfect as well, and that is why I've left this sort of wing panel off here, because I can still access the bonnet hinge here, so I can undo the bolts of the bonnet hinge, lift that up and get it perfect, but not quite at that stage of sort of perfecting all the lines in it just yet. But I cannot resist showing you guys how good these little carbon wing inserts look. They look so sick. Dun, 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 dun. The easiest wing I've ever fitted, and when this is down, look at that. That is like the V12 Vantage. That has that sort of carbon insert there. That is going to look amazing when we've got the carbon mirrors on as well. It's a carbon overload, but definitely I think the black contrasting against the carbon doesn't work as well as maybe a brighter colour. Okay, here we go. This is always a big moment for the channel. Headlights. Now these are pretty much brand new headlights, and they were included in the £8,500 price that I got all the sort of race parts from the race team from. And second-hand headlights are selling for around £1,500 each. Now I'm pretty sure that Aston Martin race cars don't actually use the stock headlights, hence why they've got brand new ones laying around. They use like a thing which is kind of almost built into the bumper. I'll try and put a picture on the screen now. Now on every car we always do seem to have problems with the headlights, and these were the ones that came off and they're pretty smashed up and damaged, and I actually wasn't going to buy these new ones here, and I'll explain why. Now we've learned before in the past that if the part number on the headlight, this one ended in BD, and the one that came off the car ends in AD, normally means there's going to be some difference in the headlights. On some cars they might have spec'd corner assist lights or sometimes high beam assist, and some headlights have them, some headlights don't, but on this Aston Martin I just couldn't figure it out. And the other thing that I think is probably going to be the main issue, the headlights that this car came off was left-hand drive, and of course we have a right-hand drive car, which means the beam pattern is probably completely different, but maybe, just maybe, with the computer we might be able to switch it back over to right-hand drive. I don't know. But with all that in mind, I just couldn't say no with the headlights being included in the price with the rest of that front end. But I'm hoping worst case we may be able to make a good set of headlights out of 4 headlights that we have. With the headlights in now, it is looking so good, but it's became a lot more evident that, well, the bumper does need to go up, well, at least a few centimetres, because you can see a gap here. There's still a bolt to go in underneath the headlight, but again, we just want to test that they're working first before we start all like moving around the panels and everything. And you can see here, there's quite a big gap between the bonnet and the actual headlight. I assume that that's supposed to sit nice and flush and not look like that, but the black inserts in the headlights match so nicely against this sort of like carbon shark grille almost. Well, the most stupid award goes to me. I was just getting really excited to see if these headlights were going to work, and then I realised, well, the inside of the car looks like that, and the battery is disconnected because all the wires are disconnected, so I can't even tell whether those headlights are going to work or not. So it looks like we won't actually know whether those headlights work or not until we've got the dash out and then back in again. The suspense is going to kill me on this one. So really, ignoring all the panel lining up and everything like that, the next job is actually to get this dashboard out so we can tackle that passenger side airbag. Which weirdly brings me on to the reason why I haven't filled the coolant up yet. Now, once again, thanks to DTB Motorsport, we've had an ex-Aston Martin technician come down and sort of show me the ropes on how this dash actually comes out, as he used to assemble them. And the good news is, I'm not actually that far off, but the bad news is, I've dismantled a lot of things that I didn't need to dismantle. But Aston Martin are correct. That full aluminium frame does need to be lifted out. There's no other shortcut around it. The whole thing, 50 kg of it, does need to come out of that car. And the reason I haven't topped up the coolant yet, because the heater matrix pipes, which go from inside the engine bay to the dashboard, if I'm right, run on coolant. And that's the reason why you get hot and cold coming out the fans inside the cabin. Now, they need to be disconnected to allow the dashboard to be removed for some absolute crazy reason. And also the steering column needs to be removed. So if I were to disconnect those two heater matrix pipes, coolant would go everywhere. I'd need to top it up again, and that would cause air locks and everything like that. So we're gonna tackle that at a later date. I just don't know whether I've got it in me physically or mentally to tackle this job today. It was only a couple of videos ago where I left the dashboard in the Aston Martin looking in this state. Now, the reason I've done this is thanks to this little thing right here, and this is the passenger side airbag. And when you have a crash, which this Aston Martin did, and the passenger airbag deploys, it also breaks the dashboard, leaving it like this. And unfortunately for me, this is all one piece. It does not separate like the old Aston Martins used to. Which in turn means that to replace that passenger side airbag, I've also got to replace the full dashboard. And to replace the full dashboard, I've got to get the thing out. Now, replacing any dashboard is never easy, but we've done it plenty of times before on other crash damaged cars, and it's capable, but it just seems that on this Aston Martin it is a lot harder. Now, I've undone every bolt that I could find to try and get this thing loose, even going to the point of removing the windscreen to see if there was any bolts at the back here, and it just seems, even though it does feel quite loose, it just won't come out. It just feels connected at the back along here, but yet still there is no bolts along here. So in the end I was stuck, and I resorted to calling Aston Martin Nottingham themselves and said, why can I not remove this dashboard yet I've undone every bolt I could see? And then they said this.
A special tool to move dashes.
So that is right, this whole aluminium frame which is built to the dashboard, which weighs 50 kg, has all got to come out together with the wiring loom as well. And that is because all of this dashboard is built outside the car and then hoisted in with a sort of crane when they manufacture it. Now, quite obviously, I don't have a dashboard crane in my unit, but what I do have is belief, and I believe that we still can remove this dashboard ourselves without having to go to Aston Martin. Now, before I start this hell of a job, quite ironically, we do actually need to go to Aston Martin for the next part that we need, so let's go. Now, the part we're collecting from the main dealers was actually cheaper than anywhere else, and that's because I couldn't find it anywhere else. But before we went inside, I was sure to take a look at some of the eye candy outside, like this F1 edition Vantage. And just look at the colour of this Vantage inside the showroom. It's awesome. Of course, I explained to the Aston Martin guys what I was doing. They said it all comes out as one. So. And before I left, I was sure to get a photo for the Instagram. It's a very rare occasion you see me at main dealers. We've got the goods, and how nice is everyone in there? They're so helpful. And the good thing is, we've actually found we've got a free service with the car. I think the Aston Martins come with 4 free services with the car, not the actual purchaser of the car. So that means when the car's repaired, we get to go back there for free and have a service. The one thing that I'm actually going to save a bit of money on, but I'll show you what we've got in here in a minute. Now, what's in this box is reasonably priced and highly explosive. It is, of course, a passenger side airbag. Now this is the part that sits underneath the dashboard, but of course we need to remove the dashboard to get to it. And the airbag cost me £486.55p. Now I've already bought a steering wheel airbag and this was second hand, and this cost me £400. So with the two airbags, I didn't think it was that badly priced. And that brings the total cost of the build so far to £13,104.54p. And that is including all the extra carbon parts that of course I didn't need, but had to buy. So I guess all that's left to do now is for me to get this dashboard out the car. Let's do it. Now before doing this, I did speak to an Aston Martin tech and he mentioned that I have to take the doors off because there's a bolt between the door and the chassis of the car that needs to be removed to take the dash out. There's only one electrical connector to the door, and then there's one bolt on the top hinge, one bolt on the bottom hinge, and then there's a hydraulic strut which sits on the hinge to prop the door open. That needs to be removed as well. And I can lift the door off all by myself. A nice and easy job. If only the dash was that easy. Now with the driver's door off, it's time to move to the passenger side door. And you can just see here the bolt, it is just inside this little cutout here. How crazy is that? Now if this hasn't put you off buying crash damaged cars already, you have got to be mad. Now I've undone a lot of things from this center console, which turns out I didn't really need to. The Aston Martin tech mentioned that there was not really much you had to undo from the center console to remove it. You just have to unplug the loom from underneath the carpet here. So knowing that, I got straight to it. And would you believe it? The Aston Martin tech was right. It did easily just come out by unplugging that loom there. I didn't need to unplug as much as I did. And here it is outside on the unit floor. But the good thing, I can build this outside the car before putting it back in again. Next thing we need to remove is the steering column. This is actually bolted to the dashboard. As you can see here, there's one black bolt just there, one black bolt just there, and two more which are right underneath with two electrical connectors as well. Then it also connects to the rest of the steering column under the car with this UJ connection, and that's clamped together with one bolt. You can see the steering column that's in the car has got splines on it, and they slot into the UJ. And just to be safe, I'm going to mark it with a black pen just to make sure I'll put it back in the exact same position. Although there might be a cutout on the ridge so that you can't put it in any other way. But I'm not going to take that risk this time. And now I can struggle back out the footwell and begin undoing the bolts at the top half of the column. Just two more electrical connectors and then the steering column is removed from the dashboard. Now I noticed when I removed the steering column, there was a sort of hose which goes from the inside of the car to the outside of the car. You can just see the 10mm bolt here. I thought this may be connected to the dashboard as well. So I began to wrestle with that hose and undo those bolts as well. Time to start labeling the postage bags because we're about to begin undoing the bolts for the aluminium frame which holds it to the actual chassis of the car. According to the Aston Martin documentary that I watched, there's like 33 bolts which hold it to the car, I believe. So it's just a case of finding every single bolt, not forgetting the ones which are inside the door. Now if you're new to the channel and you've just came here by watching this video, I'd like to explain that I'm not a mechanic and all of this has been self-taught. So if I manage to get this dashboard out and put it back in, the least you guys can do to show your support is click that subscribe button down below. So we've made some progress, but not quite enough yet. The dashboard now, it does actually move all together, but yet again still, it seems like there's more stuff at the back which is connecting it. Now there's two more bolts which I've just spotted down here, which could actually be the final bolts, but let's see. Yes. Not quite, but I do think I know where the answer is. Now we know when the dashboard comes out, it comes out with pretty much everything attached to the dash, including all the heater blowers and the heater matrix and everything like that. Now for your blowers to blow hot air into the engine, it uses the coolant. And obviously the coolant is warm because it's circulating through the engine. That's why if you start your car in the morning and put the heaters on, they won't be hot because the coolant has not gone up to temperature. So this means in the engine bay, there must be a coolant feed and a coolant return going from the engine into the heater core inside the car, which unluckily for me looks like it's going to be behind this engine. So we're going to take all this bracing off and this heat shield off just to see if we can find those two coolant parts which go into the actual cabin. And I've also noticed that just here there is one bolt there, which look like they could be for the dashboard. And then looking over here, there's a similar sort of bolts on the back side of it there. So potentially that's 4 more bolts that we need to undo to get the dashboard out. But first off, let's get that sort of heater matrix coolant pipe things off. Let's do it. So with the strut brace removed and the heat shield undone, you can just see behind the engine here the 2 coolant pipes which go in alongside the AC pipes as well. The AC pipes are held in with 2 10mm bolts, but the coolant pipes are held in by 2 sort of spring-loaded clips, which was so difficult to get to. I've managed to remove the 2 10mm for the AC pipe, but those coolant pipes just were not coming out. So I traced them back to where they were leading to in the engine bay and disconnected them from there, which was easy enough. They were just on a little C-clip and then I could pull them off the connection. And then the other one ran right behind the engine and came out on the right-hand side. Now, in a fashion, I think we are about ready to come out. I've got whatever this pipe here is for, I'm not quite sure, something to do with some, I think air just runs down there, and then we've got 2 coolant lines there, and then the aircon pipes are disconnected at the back. And if you've noticed, the dashboard is now pulled away from the actual firewall of the car. What an absolute marathon this has been to get this dash out. But I think we are... yeah, I think that is about ready to come out, but it is 50 kg and I'm definitely not going to be able to lift this out by myself. So I called in some friends.
You forget a lot of bench like 120s, you know what I mean?
Oh, okay, can you go backwards?
Sure can. Back it up. No, we can't. Oh, there we go.
Oh, yeah. Okay, what's connected? Connected. Oh, right, okay. Now, even though I thought I'd undone everything, there was still a few electrical connectors to undo.
Oh, it's just this big fat loom here.
Ready, Chris?
Yeah, now I can take this dash out.
Yeah. Right, transfer over to you.
I got it.
You got it.
Oh, wow.
Watch that tripod, Chris.
Yeah,
Know what you're like.
Oh, tripod. It's self-filming. Okay. Right.
Oh, no, he's calling it. There we go.
Yes! And the dashboard is out of the car. It's been a mini journey tackling this dashboard in the Vantage, and it was much harder than I originally thought, but now it is out. Little did I know when I first removed the airbag from the steering wheel what type of mission I was getting myself into. But along this little journey we have learnt so much. Things like Aston Martin use parts from Citroën and Peugeot, and to remove the dashboard it has to come out all as one. Now, I would say that was fun, but I'd be lying. But we have learned a lot so far with the Aston. Now, normally, when you take a dashboard out, you're left with a big, wiry mess inside the car, when actually this time it is really clean and just empty in here. You can see here the hole into the actual engine bay, and this is where the 2 aircon pipes that was fiddling around in the engine bay to try and undo, they were on 10 mils. They are going to be an absolute nightmare to get back from the other side. We also have the hose here, which we undid, and that seems like it's the heater for the windscreen. We've got 2 coolant hoses which go through there, which are still on the back of that big lump of a dashboard. But other than that, it's pretty clean in here, and well, fingers crossed, it shouldn't be too bad to put back in. And there is some good news about the dashboard being all in one piece and outside the car. And that is, we can assemble this all together before it goes back in, just like they do on the assembly line when they build these Aston Martins. So all this center console, I didn't need to take out. There's a lot of stuff here which I've taken out, which I didn't need to. All I need to be able to access is the main bolts, which are on the side and the side there as well. And then I could just plug in the main wiring looms, which are all this when we plug it all back in. Everything else didn't actually need to come out, but well, you live and you learn. I would have never have known that until I've done one. So now let me tell you the plan with this. Now the whole reason we're doing this is because of this baby here, and we need to get the whole leather top off the aluminium frame, and it is so close to coming off. I think there's just a few more bolts at the back, and I'm actually just going to have a hack at that now. At this point, I don't know whether I'm surprised, shocked, angry. Do you know what? It's not even a surprise anymore. There was literally only 4 bolts connecting this leather piece to the actual aluminium frame of the dashboard, and those 4 were, where are they? There was 1, 2 there, and 3, 4 there. That was literally it. If Aston Martin have just made those into clips and not bolts, then we could have just taken this whole leather section off without having to take all this out as well. It's absolutely mental. It just doesn't seem right. But I can see now why, well, if an Aston Martin has had a crash and the airbags are deployed, well, it's as good as a write-off. I dread to think how many hours Aston Martin would charge to actually take that out. It's a serious amount of labour, and well, I haven't even got to the point of putting it all back in. I admit it would be a lot quicker if you knew what you were doing, but still, it's not a 5-minute job. But now we have the piece that we actually need of the dashboard, the leather part of it, and with it being disconnected from the aluminium, we can access the airbag from underneath, unbolt that and put a new airbag in. But that doesn't solve the issue with a break in the leather, and we have a few options with this. Now my first option, which was always the original option, was to get the dashboard retrimmed. Because we couldn't find a new dashboard to put in, we can't just do a swap and replacement of it. We was going to get this section actually repaired and then all the leather retrimmed over the top. Now this has to be professionally done, and obviously it can't be done by any Jack, Jill or Harry, because well, this section right here is all to do with safety, and if you glue this down too hard, it doesn't have a weak spot anymore, and if the airbag was to deploy and it wouldn't deploy correctly, then you're sort of putting whoever's sitting in the passenger seat in danger. So this needs to be sort of fixed back, but to the point where if an airbag was to blow out, it would blow out correctly, which you can imagine being quite difficult. Now the next downside to repairing the dash as opposed to replacing it is the leather. We're never actually going to get that pure Aston Martin leather that they use from factory. At least I don't think they could. So the trim shop would use leather as close as possible to the Aston Martin leather, and they'll probably do both sides just to avoid any mismatches. But again, it's not going to be exact Aston Martin leather, and if it doesn't match the interior, it's going to really bug me. And the only other option we have of that is doing something custom, maybe an Alcantara dash, but that means we'd have to change stuff on the inside to match the Alcantara dashboard. But I don't know, but that could be a lost cause. But there is another option. Now I've stumbled across this on eBay, and this is a leather top piece of a dashboard, not for a Vantage, but for a DB11 2017 model. And although the dashboards are different, they do have different fascias on, the actual leather part, it looks pretty much identical to the Vantage. If you look, even all the fixtures, the fittings and the holes are exactly the same as they are on the Vantage dashboard. And I don't know about you, but it would seem absolutely mental if Aston Martin were to make a dashboard which looks so similar but not the same. I mean, it would just make more sense to do a completely different style dashboard. It just seems too much of a coincidence that it looks pretty much identical to the Vantage dashboard. I know they do have different fascias on there, but maybe they all have the same sort of fixings. I don't know. But I think it could be worth a shot. Does the DB11 top leather part of the dashboard fit exactly the same as the Vantage? Okay, so this is what an Aston Martin Vantage interior looks like without any dashboard. And the reason it looks like that is because over the past couple of videos, I've been removing the dashboard because of this thing right here, the passenger side airbag. Now, as you guys all know by now from watching the videos, Aston Martin have manufactured the car in such a way that it's made it almost virtually impossible for a DIYer like myself to be able to repair and put a Vantage back on the road. Now, in the last video, I managed to remove this full dashboard with the aluminium frame, despite Aston Martin saying that they use a crane to get it in and out the car.
Special tool.
It still just seems absolutely crazy that you have to remove this full aluminium frame with all the heater matrix in there, the air conditioning and everything else, including the wiring loom, just to get to this passenger side airbag. Now, in my opinion, removing that dashboard didn't take any skill. It was just mainly hard work. But putting it back in, well, that's where the skill's gonna come in. Now, finding a replacement dashboard has become more than difficult. In fact, finding any parts for the Vantage has been more than difficult. So now that we've got the whole dashboard out, it only left us with a few options. Now, option one was to get the original dashboard fixed. Now, what I mean by this is that we replaced the passenger side airbag, which we bought from Aston Martin in the last video. This goes underneath the dashboard to replace the broken one here, and then we get the dashboard retrimmed. But that option was quickly killed. Now, anything to do with airbags in a car has got to be done properly. It's all to do with safety, and I want to make sure that the Aston Martin is as safe as it is when it left the factory, if not safer. So when I popped an email to the trimmers to say that I was popping down this dashboard to be retrimmed, they sent this email back. They basically said they would not repair this dashboard because of where the lever breaks when it opens up for the passenger side airbag. Now, on dashboards like this, where the passenger side airbag is hidden beneath the lever, and then when it explodes, it breaks the lever, that part where it breaks is a sort of weak point in the lever and also this little plastic section here. Now, if this part of the dashboard was re-glued down and then levered over the top, it would no longer have that weak point that it needs for when the passenger airbag explodes, therefore making it unsafe. Are you guys still with me? So with that in mind, it kind of leaves us stuck. But that is where I found this baby on eBay. This is a DB11 dashboard, and I'm just hoping that this thing is exactly the same as the Vantage one, although it is Aston Martin, so we may run into a few surprises. Now, looking at the leather top, it does look pretty identical, but this is a DB11 interior and this is an Aston Martin Vantage interior. They're quite different. But the question is, do they use the same leather top as each other? Well, I for one certainly hope they do, because this is my only choice. And this choice costs me £1,400, which is insanely expensive, bringing the total cost so far to £14,504.54p. But there is one difference, and that is the leather they use on the Vantage dashboard is slightly different to the one they use on the DB11. Very, very slight. I'm hoping that is the only difference, but I think we'll get away with the leather difference as it is only slight. But the first step is to start stripping the old parts off the DB11 dashboard, and it seems the person that removed this didn't realise there was 4 bolts which held the leather part to the aluminium frame and just completely ripped it off, breaking the clips. With the DB11 dashboard stripped, it's now time to tear down the Vantage dashboard, removing all the air ducting, the wiring loom and everything else that's connected to it to transfer it over to the DB11 dash. And finally, the big moment, the whole reason we had to take this whole dashboard out, the passenger side airbag. Next up, reassemble the DB11 dashboard, or now to be known as the Vantage dashboard. And here you can just about see the difference in the leather around the speaker surround and the dashboard. It's only slight. And now it's time for the new dashboard to be married with the aluminium frame. Maybe here, Matt Armstrong was here 2022 smiley face. It had to be done. If anyone has to go through that torture of removing this again, they've got to know that I went through it as well. Now, I'd say the most difficult part about reinstalling a dashboard isn't necessarily bolting it up. It's figuring out where all the wiring routes. All the wiring plugs lead to somewhere, but if you route them the wrong way, they won't reach to the plugs that they're supposed to go in, or they could end up trapped. And the last thing you want to do is leave something unplugged or a wire trapped underneath the dashboard and not be able to get to it after you install it into the car. Now, I've double and triple checked that I've plugged in the new airbag, and with that done, I can start bolting the leather dashboard to the aluminium frame. And I'm getting excited now because the dashboard is starting to look more complete. But the thing I didn't realize at the start is that Aston Martin actually build these dashboards up before they go into the car. So that's exactly what I'm about to do. Now, if we actually manage to install the dashboard today, we can find out, one, whether the headlights work, and two, whether that pyrotechnics fuse from a Volvo car works as well. So we nearly have one completed dashboard, and it's looking good. But before we actually start lifting it in, we've got this thing to put in, which is the airbag ECU. If you remember, on the Range Rover, we have to reset this, whereas on this car, it's pretty much exactly the same. Now, I did send this off to get reset, and the guys actually mentioned that it had already been reset. So when we actually plugged in the auto in the first video and then reset that crash data, it must have already reset it. So we didn't actually need to send it away. But if we don't plug this in, well, you can't get to it without the dash out, really. So this goes in, and this is one of the very first things we put in before we put the dashboard in. And now we're ready to lift the dashboard in. Here's the part where Aston Martin used that special crane to mount the dashboard inside the car, when really all you really need is myself and Hannah. Hannah held the dashboard in place whilst I made sure that the coolant pipes went through the firewall into the engine bay. Then I can start putting the bolts in, which mount the aluminium frame to the chassis of the car. Not forgetting to make sure that the wiring loom goes to the correct places, and that all the plugs that are visible also go into the correct places. The full dashboard is bolted to the car. We are making progress. It's just whether everything works after everything else is connected. We've still got the coolant pipes to go inside the engine bay. We've still got the center console to go in, and the steering rack, and everything else. Let's carry on. There's so much wiring everywhere, but it all routes to only one place. And once you figure out where that place is, it's pretty easy from there. Now, I found one of the most fiddly parts was actually reconnecting the aircon pipes from the engine bay back up to the dashboard. It's just a really tight fitment, and they're bolted in with two 10mm nuts. And once you've got the aircon pipes connected, you need to connect up the two coolant pipes as well, which go to the heater matrix. One runs around the back of the engine and then clips in, and one goes the other side. I'm doing so well at the minute, and the dashboard is starting to look complete. And it's also bolted to the car, which is a massive sort of achievement right now. With near enough all the wiring connected and a lot of the bolts which attach the dashboard to the actual car all in place, I can start to add all the leather trims back. The tricky part about all this is that it has to go in a certain order. You could put one section in, later to realise you have to take it out to put another section back in. But now I'm onto the steering column. There's 3 electrical connectors on the steering column. I made sure that all of them were plugged in. I've got to push the steering column into the UJ, which are all marked out in the last video, to make sure that it all goes back in the same way, and then I can bolt it all back together. With the steering rack in, there is one thing that I was sort of questioning about. Now these yellow connectors you can see here, anything yellow with these sort of connectors on is to do with an airbag. And I noticed this connector down here, and I can't ever remember disconnecting anything to do with an airbag in this sort of area right down. I mean, up here, this one is for the steering wheel airbag, but that one, no idea. And actually it turns out that that plug right there is for some like European Aston Martins, which require a knee airbag for like safety reasons or so, but the UK model doesn't have a knee airbag underneath the dash. It's just not got one there, but obviously it uses the same loom, which means there's actually going to be something which is not plugged in. But that's so weird. It had me stressing for like at least half an hour thinking, where the hell does that plug go? Because I cannot remember unplugging it. But we're all clear. It doesn't need to be plugged in. Let's carry on. Onto the instrument cluster. There's one electrical connector at the back for all of this, and a ridiculous amount of bolts which hold it to the dashboard. With all the bolts in and the lever placed on top of it, it is really coming together. Next step, the clock spring and the indicator stalks. As you can see, going back to what I said a minute ago, I had to actually remove the instrument cluster to put this in. And that is because it is bolted behind the instrument cluster. I also had to remove the lever underneath this as well because it's bolted there. But hey, it's all experience. If I were to do this again, I'm sure I'd be a lot quicker. And the final part of this section, beside the steering wheel, is the paddle shifters. Then it's back on into the engine bay to assemble the strut base and everything else underneath the bonnet. We are so close now. The dashboard is now in, so we can move on to the center console. Again, Aston Martin assemble all of this outside the car before fitting it in the car. And with that done, it's time to plug everything in and pop it into the car. This was super fiddly and you're working in such a tight space, but I was determined to get this finished. And we're pretty much on the final straight now. Last little things to do is to clean up the interior before putting the seats back in. I used a Hoover, then moved on to the MA leather cleaner, which of course the link's in the description box for. This conditions the leather back to a nice matte look, how it should look from factory. And it smells great. And speaking of smelling great, the next step was to make the interior smell even better by using some of the Cloudburst sprays. I've been using these for a while now in multiple cars and they are a lifesaver. They replicate your favourite aftershave like Creed, 1 Million, Dior, Tom Ford even. And they're great for use in cars, shoes, offices, or anywhere it may be. You guys can also grab one of these with the link in the description, and there's a discount code in there for you to use as well. But would you believe it, the Aston Martin interior is pretty much back together, looking brand spanking new and smelling great. I can't believe it is real. Or is it? Surely not. No, please no, please no, please no, please no. No. I'm just joking. We actually did it. The full dashboard of the Aston Martin is now back in the car. I actually cannot believe I managed to get all of this back in. I just don't know. I just don't know how I've done it. This is 100% one of them moments where you just surprise yourself. Honestly, there was moments where I was taking this dash apart thinking, there's no way, one, I'm gonna get this out, and two, I'm ever gonna get it back in. And I was thinking, worst case, it will have to go to Aston Martin for them to do the rest of the job, but it's in. It is actually in. So if you're watching this thinking you don't have the skill to work on your own car, well, just use this as motivation. I literally have no qualification, no certificates, and I've managed to take out an Aston Martin dashboard and put it back in. But we are not in the all clear just yet. One step is putting in the dashboard. The second step is, does everything still work? We've still got the seats to put in and the steering wheel to put on and also the doors. So let's get that done, and then we're going to test whether everything works. And we can also see whether these headlights work and the engine starts because of that Volvo pyrotechnics fuse that we installed just above the battery. So many things to find out, and it's going to be a big moment after we've installed these seats and doors. So it's in with the Aston Martin seats, which of course are fully electric. So once again, there's a bunch of wires underneath the seat. And for me to be able to bolt them in, I need the battery connecting so I can adjust the seat forward and backwards so I can access the place where the bolts slot in to the rails. So on goes the battery for the first time in a long time. Okay, so I think we have our first issue, and it's not actually to do with the dashboard. It's to do with the seats. Now, to get the seats in, I've got to be able to move them backwards to get to the front bolts. And, well, I've connected up the battery, which was low. It's on 6 volts, so we've got the jumper pack on it here. And we can see all the lights have illuminated in the center of the dash. I can click the ignition on. We've got all the lights on there. I can't put the steering wheel on yet because I've not got enough room. But I have absolutely no power going to the seats, and well, obviously I need it to put the front bolts in, and the switches for the seats are behind here, and something is telling me that I unplugged them and didn't plug them back in. I've checked the fuses for the seats, they're fine. I can only think I've not plugged those switches in, and to get those switches out I've got to take that whole center console out again. The only slight thing I'm thinking, but I just don't know, is that the doors aren't connected. And would the seats not work without the doors connected? I highly doubt it, but it is worth a try. So I'll lift the door on and then we'll see whether it makes a full circuit and maybe the seats will work after them. But I don't know, I highly doubt it, but we'll give it a go. Oh my god. Aston Martin amazes me again. I've got the door on, and like, what are the chances? The seat, it now moves, so there must be something in that door with the electrical connector in there creating a full circuit with the seat. I mean, what on earth? So if you've got the doors off on the car, you cannot move your seat backwards and forward. What wow. So it actually turns out the loom with the door is actually connected to the seats, and it's something to do with this seat memory. When you open the door, the seat would move back so you can get in, and then when you sit in the seat, it will move forward to your driving position. So it is all part of one circuit randomly. But now I can move the seat back, I can put the steering wheel on. We did it. Everything is in. The dashboard, the center console, the seats, the doors. It is all on, and so far, it seems to be working. We are, of course, missing a windscreen, but that will be next. And everything here is all illuminating. It seems to be plugged in. Even the dash is lit up as well. We still have a restraint fault, but I assume, hopefully, we could just code that off with the Autel later, but we'll figure that out. Now, as most of you know, when we do a dashboard change, we always give it a score out of 10. 10 out of 10 being no bolts are left over after the dashboard has been replaced. And and 0 out of 10, being that there was 10 bolts left over. Anything more than 10 bolts left over, you're in minus figures. Now, you've got to give it to me. This dashboard has been a tough one, and I've undone so many bolts, which leaves me with more of a chance of not putting in some bolts. But right here is the leftover bolts, and I could not find anywhere where these actually went to, and they are all the same type of bolt, the T30 bolt. And if I remember rightly, these were the bolts which sort of held the lever to the frame of the dashboard, and there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bolts left, which actually gives me a fairly respectable 4 out of 10 for an Aston Martin Vantage dashboard change. I think that's okay, but 6 bolts, I don't know where they went. Now, a few videos ago, we fitted this front end, including these headlights, and we're pretty sure that they came out of a left-hand drive car, and they have a completely different part number to the ones that were in there, which were completely smashed. Now, you don't have to look far to find out how expensive the headlights are. This one is on eBay at 1,500 quid just for one. But I haven't been able to see whether these headlights actually work yet or not, because we haven't had the dashboard in. But now the dashboard's in, yep, we can test whether these headlights work. Okay, I am 100% expecting these headlights not to work. It's a new car. The part numbers are completely different. I mean, this car is so sensitive to anything like that. Ignition on. Have we got ignition, please? Yes, we have ignition. Here we go. Oh my God. I can see headlights working. No. They're actually working. Oh my God. My look could have changed with headlights. This seems to be the only time I've bought headlights with a completely different part number and they've actually worked. The full beam works, and just to check the indicators, they also work as well. It may not mean anything to some people, but to me, this is unreal. Still cannot believe it. Come on! Maybe, just maybe, my look has changed with headlights from today. I honestly thought that they were not going to work. Completely different part numbers on a car which is just so sensitive to part numbers and electronics and everything like that. I can't believe that's working. Even the sound of the indicator sounds expensive. Listen. Now, although the headlights work, the beam pattern of the headlights could be completely off, because we think that these headlights that came off a left-hand drive car, and the left-hand drive headlights are a completely different beam pattern to a right-hand drive headlight car. The only way to find out is take it to an MOT testing centre, but so far them actually working is a massive bonus. Now, I'd like to mention, whilst it's on my mind, I'm going to be heading to a show called Gravity on the 10th of July. I'm going to have a trade stand there. I'm going to be taking 2 cars. One, maybe the Aston if we get a windscreen in and it rolls or starts by then. But if you guys wanted to come and check out all the merch and the cars and everything like that, the link is in the description box below, and I'll see you guys there on the 10th. But now we all know the next step, and that is, will the Volvo pyrotechnics fuse actually work? And the only way we can find out whether it works or not is to try and start the Aston. But unfortunately for me and yourselves watching, we still don't have cooling in both of the expansion bottles in the engine bay. And these need to be vacuum filled, which is a whole other process. Just about a month ago now, I took a massive gamble on buying a crash damaged 2019 Aston Martin Vantage. I bought it as a non-runner, but actually on the day of collecting it, we actually managed to get it started. Yeah! But not for long though, because it had a massive coolant leak and it couldn't drive out of its own accord because it had some suspension damage as well. We managed to push and use trolleys to get the Aston inside the unit and onto this ramp where it's stayed for the past month, where we've been repairing it, as you guys would know. We fixed inner tie rods, we put front ends on it, we put headlights on it, and in the last video we managed to fit a full new dashboard and airbags. The thing is though, since doing all this work, we still have no idea whether it's going to start up or not. The last time we started it, we jumped the pyro fuse connection, and it's not the safest option. We've since changed the dashboard and then also replaced a pyro fuse with a Volvo pyro fuse because it was a lot cheaper and seemed exactly the same. And we can't just go ahead and try and start it now because there is absolutely no coolant in there because we've had all the radiators off the front, and there is 2 coolant reservoirs. We've got this one here, and then underneath this Aston Martin plastic section here is another coolant reservoir. This coolant reservoir is for the charge coolers and to cool the turbos, and I believe it runs all the way through the back to actually run coolant on the gearbox as well. So we've got to make sure both of these are filled before we can start it. But Aston Martin being Aston Martin, well, actually the engine is an AMG engine, but either way, you can't just top it up. It's got to be vacuum filled, and well, let's just crack on with it. So to vacuum fill the coolant system, this is what you're gonna need. This is, well, best way to put it, a vacuum filler. So we're gonna head over to the expansion tank, undo the cap, and then instead of the cap, replace it with the vacuum filler. It has a pressure gauge on the top and a bung on the bottom to make a nice seal with the expansion tank. And it sections off to the right hand side where you attach your T-piece to, and then that connects to your airline. This blows air across the vacuum filler, and when you open that tap, it should create a vacuum in the coolant system, but mine didn't seem to be getting any vacuum. Now there's an overflow pipe for the coolant that you can see here, which runs down to another overflow bottle, and then a pipe off that leads to the floor just to drain off any excess coolant. So I thought that this might be the reason I'm not getting any vacuum. So I undid that overflow pipe and then bunged it with a bolt and a bit of tape with hope to make some vacuum. But after turning on the air compressor, I still had no vacuum in the coolant system. Okay, so we've got 2 issues already. I can't get any vacuum through the cooling system. No vacuum at all, which can either only mean a couple of things. Either there is a huge leak somewhere in the system, or I'm just not doing it right. So what I'm going to do, instead of popping coolant in it first, I'm just going to run some water in there and just see if there's somewhere obvious that it's coming out. I don't have a smoke tester to smoke test it, but I'm just going to run some water through and we'll see what happens. Yep, that's why it's not vacuum filling, because it's coming out. So it's evident that there's a leak. I've just got to find out where it was coming from. I couldn't see much from underneath, so I started taking apart the top end of the car. Aha! I found it. I found the issue. There we go. We are in. So it's just a radiator hose which wasn't connected out of the many radiators on the front of this car. And now, with any luck, we should get some vacuum. And you can see here on my gauge, we're starting to create a nice bit of vacuum. And you know this because you can kind of feel it in the coolant pipes. It's sort of suctioned in. After a while, I could see that the cooling system was holding vacuum. So now it's time to add the coolant. So I've got to attach the coolant hose to the vacuum system, and then it simply just sucks the coolant into the cooling system. And then later realized I seem to have a faulty pressure gauge because it seems to be saying at the same pressure no matter how much coolant I sucked into the system. Now as for the other expansion tank, well, it's not good news. My vacuum filler didn't seem to fit in the top of it. So I was going to take a chance here and just fill it up with coolant with hopes that it would self-bleed. Okay, we are looking good. We should be all watertight now. Fingers crossed. Both of the reservoirs are filled up. It's time for the moment that I've been waiting for since even ripping out the dashboard, and that is starting it up. Now before we go ahead and start the Aston, I just wanted to run the Autel through it just to make sure we've got no dramatic fault codes. Remember, we have to read this as a C63S because it won't read as an Aston Martin. But we've learned they're pretty much the same thing. And as suspected, we do have a few fault codes, but the one I'm most worried about is the restraint system. The last thing I want is a fault code for that passenger side airbag, which is underneath the dashboard and not accessible, which we spent hours putting in. Okay, I had a little bit of a heart sink moment then. I was thinking we may get a fault for the passenger side airbag, which we can't actually access without taking the full dashboard out, but we still have fault codes for the restraint system, but luckily they're the fault codes that we could fix. So all of these fault codes, if I'm right, are for the seat belt. So you can see here the squib for the emergency tensioning retractor for the belt end fitting front passenger is faulty. There's a short circuit to the ground, and it's exactly the same for the driver's side. Now, although the seat belts didn't lock out, they're still bringing up a crash fault code. So it seems as if to get rid of this fault, we have to remove the seat belts, send them away to get reset, and then reinstall them. But that shouldn't stop us from starting the car today. Moment of truth. Will it start? I don't think it's a good idea to sit here just in case of an airbag. Yeah, in fact, I am going to sit out of the way. Just in case, you know, safety and all that. Go on. No? Nothing. What? It's gone red. Yeah, it's gone red, so press it. Oh! She's good! She's on, she's running, and no airbags have gone. We also have an engine management light. Not quite sure what that one's for. Now I'm going to keep an eye on the coolant reservoirs. I've left the cap open. Hopefully any airlocks or any air bubbles in them will rise up through the top and make the way out. But the good news is she's running and no airbags deployed, hopefully. And I think it's just those seatbelts that we need some attention to. We are pretty much at temperature and everything does seem all good. We do still have an engine light, the airbag light, and also EDIF unavailable, whatever that means as well. So it doesn't seem to matter what I do, I can't get that restraint system fault off the dashboard to do with the seatbelt. So it seems we're gonna have to take them out and send them away to be reset, but it's not the worst thing in the world. Now I really cannot wait to actually drive this thing off the ramp and out the unit, and we're not that far away. There is a few more things that we've got to do. Now it's really only the bonnet and the bumper which needs paint, but what I want to do before it goes to paint is make sure that everything all lines up. And at the minute we are far from that. The gap between the bonnet and the door is a fairly big gap, and it's also lower than the door as well. I didn't put the upper wing back in place so I can access the bonnet hinges just to move that around. The bumper has a pretty big gap here. There's a gap between the bumper and the headlight. The bonnet isn't the best fitting at the moment. The gap is absolutely huge over here. The gap is huge here. And again, this bonnet gap is inconsistent to the one over there. So let's start this sort of tedious job of lining everything up before getting the wheels on and getting out of it. So to raise the bonnet up and down, I can do this by accessing the bonnet hinge. Then the adjustment for the bonnet forward and backwards and left to right is done from where the bonnet actually bolts onto the bonnet hinge at the top. Now when I went into Aston Martin to collect the passenger side airbag, I did ask the technician, do they have any panel gap tolerances? And they said no. When they do the PDI inspection, they just make sure that the panel gaps are the same both sides. So my checking tool to make sure it's the same both sides is this little trim tool. And both sides seem pretty close. But if I'm honest, I don't know how well the panels line up from factory. And the only thing I've got to go off is this video I took of an Aston Martin Vantage outside Aston Martin when we went. So I'm just trying to get the bonnet lines as close to that video as possible. And next up is the front bumper. You can see it's pretty low compared to the bonnet. And kind of fortunately for me, there is loads of adjustment screws for the bumper to bring it up to where the bonnet sits. And trust me, if you've ever done this job before, trying to line panels up on a car, you will get sick of it. I actually ended up taking out the headlights to try and line the bumper up a bit better before popping them back in and then trying to line the headlights up to the bumper because they have loads of adjustment screws on as well. This is honestly one of the most frustrating things ever. I've played around with this for too long now. And well, I thought I got the panel gap perfect here. I thought I got it perfect here. I thought I got it pretty much perfect there. You line the headlights up and then it's like the bonnet is just coming just short of the headlight. It almost like the bonnet needs to come forward a bit more. And this gap seems a little too big, I don't know. But if I move the bonnet forward, then it's going to make this gap bigger. It's also going to mean that the body line here is going to be edged forward as well. And oh, it's just, and it's the same the other side. Look, the headlight is just coming short of the bonnet. If I move the headlight back, it's just not going to solve things. It's going to be further away from the bumper. And I will try and just move the bonnet forward a tiny bit, but I just can't see me getting this right. In the end, I ended up giving up. The bonnet and the bumper does still have to go to paint, which means they will have to come off again. But it would have been nice just to be able to undo them, get them painted, and then pop them back in the same position. But it looks like we'll worry about that more when we come to refit them, as I'm sure they do fit bang on. They all are OEM parts. And we know everything that we've replaced is all straight. But for now, I'm going to start bolting on all the final little bits and bobs. And if you watched the previous videos, you would know that I bought a few extra things for the Aston, like carbon wing mirrors. Instead of replacing the full wing mirror, I've just managed to pull off the cap, and then I'm going to replace it for this genuine Aston Martin carbon mirror cap, which now will match the front carbon splitter, and the carbon bonnet vents, of course. Next up, the rear diffuser. We have a full carbon one to replace the standard rear diffuser. But it wasn't long until we ran into a few issues with that. So this diffuser came off a race car. Now race cars don't tend to have reverse lights, and well, here is the reverse light, which is just a tiny little thing here, and there's no other reverse light on there, which leaves us with kind of a few options. And one option is to put the old one back on and have a reverse light but have no carbon. The other option was originally to drill into this and cut this out to have a reverse light, but as you can see, if we put this in the correct place, this sits so much further out than that reverse light that if we cut there, they would just, it's nowhere near it. The only other thing we could do is extend the wiring out. Like, would you just drill and pop a little LED light in there? Let me know. Well, let's put it on and we'll go from there. Well, I came to a verdict. This is on now. Okay, I don't know if you can see it, we're like in a tight space, but this is absolutely colossal. You can tell it's off a race car. This probably actually works as a race car feature. It probably has some form of downforce and it is there for a reason. But it's absolutely colossal, and I think, in my opinion right now, it does look out of place. It literally looks like someone's just whacked a bit of wood on the back. If we had a big spoiler to go with it, I wouldn't be that bothered. I think this has just got such a flipping epic look at it, it's so much aggression, whereas the ducktail on the back hasn't got that much aggression. I vote, we might have to go back to original, I think. I vote no. Let me know in the comment section. Let's get this off, get a windscreen in, and we can finally get this out on the first try. So maybe I'm getting old. I actually said no to a modification. And whilst I have time to think about my mature decision, Screensaver turned up with a new windscreen for the Aston, the final piece of the puzzle. Now, windscreens don't come cheap at the best of times, but when they're on an Aston Martin, it gets even more expensive. Now, direct from Aston Martin, a windscreen would have cost me £2,300, but from Screensaver, still, it's an expensive windscreen, but it saved me quite a lot. at £1,200. We also have to do a massive shout out to Rob at Auto Dents because I spotted a pretty good dent in the passenger side door where the old bonnet had creased into it. He came out and did some paintless dent removal on the door, and now you wouldn't have even known that it was there. And with all that done, that brings the total cost now so far to £15,704.54p. But now it's the moment I've been waiting for the whole time since owning this Aston Martin, and that is driving it for the first time to the body shop. I literally cannot wait. Here we go. I have absolutely no idea how this has happened in my life, but here I am driving a 2019 Aston Martin Vantage that I bought and rebuilt. How is this happening?
Straight towards the warm sun and into his hands.
Oh, we're having an issue already. Got a gearbox fault. Yes, we've got a gearbox fault already. Hello? Can you follow me? Because I keep cutting out.
Yeah, okay, give me 2 seconds. I just need to drop something off at the unit.
So just like the C63, we haven't made it far before getting an issue. It seems to be something gearbox related, I think, at the minute, and I don't have the code reader with me. We're only going just down the road to the body shop, but all we've got to do is make it there. This is the fault that we're getting, EDIF unavailable. That could mean absolutely anything in the world of Aston Martin. We also have an engine management light on as well. So perhaps we should just whack it in normal mode. I did get a bit eager and put it in sport, but we're waiting for Hannah to follow us and we'll see if we can make it there. Come on, Aston. So as usual with crash damaged cars, we're bound to get some teething issues when we first take it out. Okay, Hannah is behind now. Come on, Aston, we're just going to the body shop there. But it seemed this one was just a small hiccup, and afterwards it seemed to drive completely fine despite the fault codes on the dash. And it was also good to see that the 360 cameras were working as well. But it finally made it to Allied Automotive, where the bonnet and bumper will be painted. Okay, so bonnet and bumper is now stripped, ready for paint. I have taken it all apart, but it can all go back together with the same alignment, although we still got to perfect it. So it will stay here now for about a week, and then the car should be fully done. So here it is, the day where we finally collect the Aston, where it might look now like a complete car. Yes, there is a few faults here and there which we had when we actually went to go and drop it off, but I'm hoping to sort them today as well. Let's go and see what it looks like now with the painted bonnet and the bumper. This is going to be so sick. Rebuilding a crash damaged Aston Martin has been far from easy, but I was willing to take that risk. Finding the parts has been hard,
£5,880.13.
but replacing that dashboard has been next level. But I'm hoping in today's video we can get it one step closer for it to be finally put back on the road for real. And here we have one black bumper. It does look a lot better. Oh, and the bonnet's already on. It's wow. Oh, it looks so much different already. As I still had a lot of fitting up to do, I got the bumper, bolted it up to the car with a few bolts, and got it back to the unit. And we are back at the unit. You may notice that Aston isn't quite complete just yet. It's missing the headlights and the front bumper, which is over there, but they are all painted and ready to go on. I just didn't want to reveal it this early. But the black paint is now making the Aston look so much more complete. It has sat for a few weeks and it is insanely dusty right now, but I'm sure after a good clean up, it's going to look amazing. But the bonnet and the bumper to be painted, of course, wasn't free. This cost £800, bringing the total cost of repairs so far to £16,504.54. And we have to do a massive shout out to Certified Tinter for popping down and tinting the windows on the Aston. That is so much better, in my opinion. But unfortunately, the cost for repairing this thing doesn't stop there. Now, if you remember in the last video, when we took this out on its first little drive to the body shop, we did have a few faults appear on the dashboard. One of them being an E-diff fault. E-diff, of course, meaning electronic differential. In order for the E-differential to work and to work properly, we need to have a fully charged battery because it uses a lot of power. Now, an E-diff does exactly what it says on the tin. It's electronically controlled and gets signals from the sensors on the wheels. It will then send different amount of torque to each wheel depending on oversteer or wheel spin, and it can do this in milliseconds. But in order for this to work, we need a full charge from the battery. Now, yes, when I bought the car, I did replace the battery for a brand new one, but since it's been sat here for such a long time, it's became discharged and I can't seem to get it to charge up again. So the fix, I think, was an obvious one. I needed to replace the old battery, which actually was a new battery, go back to the shop I bought it from and replace it for another new one. And I'm hoping now with a fully charged battery we should see no E-diff fault. Now, I guess the only way to find out whether that's worked or not is to take this thing out on its first proper drive. But to take this out on its first proper drive, we need to build up the front end. So here it goes. So here's the moment that I've been waiting for such a long time. To see the Aston Martin from the outside looking complete. Like a full, undamaged Aston Martin Vantage. Now, we spent hours trying to line up panels in the last video and still couldn't get it 100% perfect. But now the car's painted, I'm going to spend that little bit more time to try and perfect the lines between the bumper, the headlights and the bonnet. So what you're seeing here is just a fraction of the time I spent trying to align this thing. And then of course there's the under tray to go on, the carbon bonnet vents, and then the Aston is just about done. Wow, this is literally one of those pinch yourself moments. It looks so good. What a difference a bonnet and a bumper can make. It looks absolutely mental. And the absolute most craziest thing about this, I own an Aston Martin. 3 years ago, I was working at an Indian restaurant and now I managed to rebuild an Aston up to this point right now, and I'm about to take it on its first real proper drive. A normal regular person like myself has managed to wing his way into working his dream job and owning cars like this. If I can do it, I am pretty confident any one of you guys watching can. And on that note, because of the amount of hard work and money that has gone into this Aston Martin, I've treated myself to a little gift here. I'm going to be keeping the Aston at least for a while. So I treated myself to some lovely matte bond number plates. As cheesy as it may be, I love it. And of course, these plates have been sorted by UMR Accessories as usual. But reality check, we're still not quite there yet. Whilst we can go out there and take it for its first real proper drive, it'll be short-lived because there's a few faults and a few more fixes that is going to require it being in the unit for a little bit longer than first expected. Now, a lot of crash damaged cars which have been repaired may look okay from the outside, but could contain a lot of unexpected faults. And sometimes the unexpected faults are the ones which hurt the most. Especially when you've gone out and bought a car which you believe to have been straight and no problems, and then taken it home to find out it is riddled with them. So on the final diagnostic report, we're actually only showing 3 faults. One is with the 360 camera, which we can do a calibration for, and we'll get to that later in the video. The other is for the air conditioning, because we need gas in the air conditioning. And another one is for the electrical seat, something with the memory in the electric seat. But again, we can get to that. But that is not showing us why we have an airbag light on here. We have still EDIF unavailable. So maybe that battery hasn't fixed it. I guess we'll find out when we take it for a drive. And then this airbag light here, front right and also front left as well. And those airbag lights are the reason why this first drive will be short-lived. But we'll get to that later. For now, I need to take this on the road. So we're going to be trying to fix those lights later in the video, and they become a little trickier than first expected. But for now, let's try and get that EDIF light off. Okay, here we go. The budget James Bond is on the road. Right, this time we're going to take things steady from the off. Well, first off, no, we still got EDIF unavailable. I guess unavailable isn't as bad as broken, it's just unavailable. Maybe there's some calibration process that it needs. I'm not quite sure, but so far EDIF is still unavailable, so no electronic differential. Well, I think it's safe to let the Aston breathe. Let's see what she can do. Standard exhaust system, and we've got crackles on downshifts. It's so fast. Now, yes, it was fast, but the wheel alignment was all over the place. So I took it in to get laser aligned. So all the wheels were pointing in the right direction and the steering wheel was straight, which then meant I could calibrate the 360 cameras so they all worked properly. And there was also one more thing which actually fixed itself. I don't know how. It's a miracle. No more EDIF unavailable. The message has gone from the dashboard. We only have 2 more faults left. Now I'm actually thinking, was the EDIF unavailable because the gearbox wasn't warm enough? Now I've got a bit of temperature you can see in the gearbox. It's disappeared. Well, so far, bar a few warning lights on the dashboard, it seems we have a successful first drive of the Aston. What a car. Now from here it does look pretty cool, but there's a few things that I'm still not quite happy about. I'm still not sure about the panel fitment along this headlight. I'm pretty sure there's not meant to be a gap maybe this big between the bonnet and the headlight. I've tried everything to get it perfect. It's exactly the same on the other side. It's almost like the bonnet needs to come forward, but if the bonnet comes forward it'd be too close to the bumper, but we could move the bumper forward. But also if we move the bonnet forward, we're going to have a much bigger gap between the bumper, between the bonnet and the door, which just isn't going to look right. Hey Kev. So I think maybe we're going to have to look at another Aston Martin in the flesh just to check all the panel lines out. But other than that, we've only got 2 more faults left. And if you guys thought the Aston was expensive to repair, just look how much it's going to cost to run. I just put £130 in the fuel tank, and that is an estimate of 180 miles, 179 miles, and look, we have a full tank there. And we're back in the ramp. It was short-lived. Now, I won't be installing this badge on the front until this car is 100% ready for the road. And we're back to the fault that is stopping us from properly putting it on the road. These 2 warning lights. and these are caused by the tensioners in the front right seatbelt and the front left seatbelt. But there is something we can do about it. The way to cancel that out is to remove the seatbelts. We're going to send it to the airbag team. They're going to reset them, and then we can plug them all back in, and it'll be as safe, as sound as what it was when it left the factory. The only issue is, I thought the seatbelts were going to be fairly easy to get to, but I was pretty naive. It's an Aston Martin. I thought I could save a bit of time here by calling Aston Martin and asking the technicians how the seatbelts remove, as it's a lot easier when you know what you're doing.
Thank you for calling.
They must think I'm so annoying.
Hello, it's just on the phone with a customer at the moment. Can I get him to give you a call back in about 5 to 10 minutes?
Yeah, that would be perfect. They never called back. So, it looks like the usual case. We're going at it alone. Removing seatbelts from a car is never normally difficult. It's just frustrating to get to as they're hidden behind a lot of panels. And it's exactly the same for the Aston. We've got to get the rear leather trim off, which requires us to remove, I guess, a lot of trim to get to it. There's bolts in the back, which hold the sort of parcel shelf to it. The trim on the roof lining is also holding the trim with the seatbelt on. There's a few Allen key bolts that we need to undo as well. And then to be able to pull the trim away from the side, I need to start taking off all this center section here. And all the bolts for this center section were hidden underneath the carpet. And there was a lot of them. And then I could just about pull the panel away just enough to access part of the seatbelt behind it. Here's the airbag plug that I'm going to carefully disconnect. And then there's one 13mm bolt holding the seatbelt to the frame of the car. Now the second half of the seatbelt is connected just by the side of the seat, but it's impossible to get to without actually removing the seat. So it looks like the seats are coming out again. And with the seats removed, I can then undo the other electrical connection for the airbag sensor and undo the final bolt to remove the full seatbelt. And there they both are, finally out. So the interior of the Aston being complete didn't last that long, and neither did driving it. But now we have both seatbelts out and ready to be shipped to the airbag team. Here you can see the tensioner on this side, which I don't think's actually been deployed, whereas on this side, you can see here it's a little bit shorter, so that side I would say has been deployed, but all this is going to be reset back to factory standards and everything, then we can pop them back in. That should take around 2 to 3 days, but look at the state of the interior. It was never going to be an easy job, was it? But whilst we wait a few days for those seatbelts to come back, there's a few things that we need to do. Now this isn't probably going to make much sense in this video, but you'll find out why we're doing this in the next one. But for now, I need to remove the calipers away from the car, all 4 of them. The Aston has brake wear sensors on every single corner, so we need to undo them as well as removing the brake lines and the caliper from the disc. And I don't know about you, but the Aston Martin sticker on the calipers just looks wrong that way round. This is the rear one. With all 4 calipers removed, I'm going to start stripping the hardware from them, so it's just a bare caliper. And Chris is going to start cleaning them up so they're nice and fresh with no dirt on them. And once they're all clean, we can then start rubbing them down with the Scotch pad. Once they're rubbed down, we begin masking them up, and you guys can sort of get the picture of what's going on here. And welcome to our Aston Martin registered spray booth. Time to mix the paint. Yes, white. You may think I've gone absolutely mad, but I've been mad since birth. This shouldn't be a surprise to you guys. So now we're adding the white paint, building up the layers. You may think white calipers would just get really dirty, but with the layer of ceramic coat, once they're dry, we should be able to prevent that and protect the calipers at the same time. Once we've built up a few layers, we let them set and dry, before then adding the lacquer.
How's it going, Chris?
Brilliant, mate. This is how Aston Martin specify it.
And then once they're dry, I can then begin reassembling the calipers all back together with the brake pads. And then fit them back to the car. The job is done. 2 white calipers. The only thing that we're missing is the Aston Martin badge here, but that should be here tomorrow. Update, the stickers arrived and I put them on the way that I think they should go on, with the Aston Martin always facing inside the wheel. The same for the back one. But yes, it's brave, but this will all make sense in the next video, trust me. I've not bled the brakes or anything just yet, but one thing I did want to do is just put the wheel on just to see what they'd look like behind the wheel, because I know it's going to look absolutely mental. Yeah, man. That looks absolutely mental. But yes, as I said, it will all make sense in the next video. But I don't know what you guys think. People are a little bit too reserved, especially in the UK, when it comes to modifying or customizing your own car. Why not modify the car the way you want it? Especially as I'm going to be keeping this for at least a short amount of time, or maybe a long amount of time. I still don't know. So here it is, the 2019 crash damaged Aston Martin, which so far to repair has cost me £16,504.54. And that's not including my labour. But what a great looking car it's turning out to be. And although it has cost me the best part of £16,000 so far to get to this point, it could have cost me a lot more. I've managed to cross-reference parts that Aston Martin used from other cars like Volvos, Mercedes and even Citroën and Peugeot to make a super expensive rebuild just become expensive. But there is a few things that we're missing in order to complete this car today. And that should be in this box right here. Here we have the seat belts. If you remember in the last video, we still had 2 warnings on the dashboard, both referring to the pre-tensioners on the belts. I sent the old belts off to the airbag team. They've put new tensioners on the belts. And this cost me £455. But with that, we've got brand new belts with a more vibrant red than before. And once we install these ones, we should hopefully have no more lights on the dash. The belts can only be installed one way. If you install these at the slightest wrong angle, then the belts will just be locked out and you won't be able to put them on. And if you remember from the last video, we had to strip almost half of the interior out just to replace these belts. So it's a fair old job putting this all back together. But once I got the belts back in, I could then reinstall the seats. And now it's starting to look more like a complete Aston Martin. So here it is, one complete interior with now, fingers crossed, no more warning lights on the dashboard. So this should be it, a complete car. And there's only one way to test it, the auto. Will we have any restraint faults from the Aston Martin now with the new seatbelts in? Come on. Airbag, oh, airbag light has gone off. No messages so far. Ignition on. All lights on the dashboard. No messages. It is looking good so far. We just need to check whether we have any codes on the auto. Now remember, we have to scan this car as a Mercedes 205 C63. We learned this from the very first day that we picked it up when we tried to use the Autel to scan it as an Aston Martin and it wouldn't work. But bearing in mind that the Aston uses an AMG engine, it seems like the ECU is also an AMG one. A lot of you guys have been asking where I got my Autel from, and I've put a link in the description box for that as well. But so far, we're looking like we've got no faults, which is great. Not even any on the restraint system. Yes. I'll have a fault here. I'm gonna. Yeah, okay, fault. 360 camera, yeah. All Although we didn't pass with flying colours, it seems we have a few faults, all of which just looks like they need calibrating, like the 360 camera, and we need to add gas in the aircon. But there's no dramas there. So there it is, one almost faultless Aston Martin Vantage. Who would have thought it from the moment we picked this thing up? And the final part of the puzzle, well, the seat belts. So, white calipers. We painted the calipers in the last video, and I was going to explain in this video why we went from red to white. But before I do that, I've got to make sure I bleed the brakes. I didn't do this straight away because I wanted to make sure that the paint had fully cured before I start bleeding them, and then may accidentally drop a little bit of brake fluid on there. For this, I'm going to be using my brake bleeding kit, which I grabbed off eBay. And on the Aston, there's 2 bleed nipples each side, and we're just going to pull a vacuum out of both using my kit. So this is the part where we separate a few people. Now the Aston looks great in black, I admit, but it was never going to stay this colour. It wasn't my final idea of what this car was going to look like once I've finished with it. I wanted to make this carbon here and on the front, I wanted to just pop away from the car. And also black cars are one of the hardest to keep looking fresh, especially when I want to actually drive this thing. Yeah, that's right. I'm going to be wrapping it. Oh no, why are you doing that? You're just going to ruin it. Look, if we all like the same thing, we'd all be driving the same car in the same colour. It'd be such a boring world. Yeah, but why wrap over fresh paint? Why didn't you just get the whole thing painted if you wanted the colour change? Well, because it would have cost a lot more to paint than just a bonnet and a bumper. And besides, wrap gives you the flexibility to be able to change the colour of the car whenever you like. Well, you can't wrap over fresh paint, and whatever colour is in that box, well, I just don't like it. Don't worry. It is not fresh paint. This car has sat here for a while now, just like the Range Rover did before I wrapped that, just like the RS5 did before I wrapped that, and just like the Golf R did before I wrapped that. And I understand not every single person is going to like what I do. That's the whole point of the comment section below. You guys can comment your opinion. But if I'm honest, I've had a little peek at this and I'm not so sure about it on the roll. Maybe it'll look different on the car. And I know I'm also going to get the question of why didn't I just wrap the car instead of getting it painted? It would have saved some money. Well, I have actually done this on a few builds, and some people have said I've not done a proper job because the car's not been painted underneath the wrap. So at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter which way I do it or which way you guys choose to do it if you're going to do this yourself at home. Some people will like it and some people won't. I don't think there's a right or wrong way to go about this, but for this time, I've decided to paint it before the wrap. So now that that's over and done with, let's show you guys the colour. Here we go. This is KPMF's Satin Iced Red. I think that's the name of it. We used the purple on Liam's Audi S3, and now it's time to use the red on the Aston Martin. Now, at first glimpse, I wasn't too sure, but now I've saw it with a bit of sunlight on it, it's got a nice shine to it, and it should pop nicely against the carbon. But there's only one way of finding out what an iced satin red Aston is going to look like, and that is to start getting it on the car. So, why satin red? Well, originally, and I know a lot of you guys wanted to see British Racing Green. The problem is, British Racing Green is an Aston Martin colour. And I think if I try and replicate that with a wrap, it would just make it look like a fake version and it just wouldn't look right. So instead of trying to replicate something, I wanted to go completely the other end of the scale and do a colour that Aston Martin don't do from the factory. Satin red. That way I think the car is going to stand out from the other Aston Martins whilst also giving it a nice finish and not clashing with the interior being black with red stitching. And I think the white calipers are going to contrast nicely against this colour. And if you guys are watching this at home, I want to encourage all of you not to be scared of what other people think about what you do to your car. It is your car. Do what you like. Okay, so what are we thinking so far? I'll be honest with you guys, when I put the rear quarter on, I wasn't too sure. But then when I started to put the door on, and I started to see lines in the car that I didn't even know was there, like here and all like that, when you see it on the black side, it just hides those sort of lines, and then it also, as well, makes the carbon pop so much nicer against the sort of red rather than the black against the carbon. So, at the minute, I think we're onto a winner. We could be. Now, my sort of original plan was to leave these side skirts black, but now that I've got the door and the rear quarter wrapped, I'm thinking those side skirts look a little bit strange just being black, so I think I will wrap them, but I don't know, maybe I'll leave it to last just to see what it looks like. And the same goes for the door handle. I wasn't too sure whether to leave these black or go red, but I'm sure these handles are designed to sort of make the door look nice and smooth, and then with it being black, it just stands out a lot. And yeah, I think it probably has to go red. It's just these parts of the handle here. It's going to be really nice to get a nice sort of cut around there, unless we remove the whole thing, which I can imagine being well, it's going to be a nightmare, isn't it? So I think we'll try and wrap it with it on, but again, we'll come back to that. So next up is the bonnet, and this is not going to be like a regular bonnet. This bonnet is huge. It's actually wider than the wrap. You can see here how much we're going to have to stretch the wrap to be able to do this in one piece. So I was here for a fair amount of time trying to heat it up, pick it up, stretch it, heat it up, pick it up and stretch it, and time after time I could not get it to stretch the whole length of the bonnet, but eventually with help from Hannah we just about managed to do it. But I wanted to be careful not to stretch it too far that it discolors it, but I think we've just about popped the nail on the head with it, and look at it clashing against that carbon so nicely. Moving on to the front bumper, which is usually one of the hardest parts of a car, but this front bumper on the Aston, well, it's pretty small, so easily done. And with a little editing magic, the left side is done and moving on to the boot. But again, all tiny little panels, so it wasn't too difficult if I'm honest. I've made the executive decision to wrap the side skirt red. I felt with it being black, it was hiding part of the car and making the Aston look higher than it actually is. And with the side skirt wrapped, I can then pop the wheels on, do the last final touches before getting the Aston Martin on the road, faultless for the first time since the accident. So here I am, the budget James Bond with holes in his ears. But what a car. It looks absolutely unreal, and I am over the moon with this. To drive this for the first time with no faults is absolute. I cannot even explain the feeling you get when driving this car. It makes you just want to make excuses up just to go out and drive this thing. It's so good. It's fast, it handles well, the seats are comfy, and it looks so good. I still actually cannot believe that this is my car. This is unreal. From what it was to what it is now it's absolutely unreal. Now, a few of you may have noticed the few changes that I did before I revealed this thing to you guys. I still can't take me seriously in this. And that was the side skirts here, and also the front splitter. Now, when I first pulled the Aston outside after wrapping it, something just didn't look right to me. And my eyes were immediately drawn to the red side skirt that I had. So straight away, I got rid of the red side skirt, leaving it black, which then looked a lot nicer flowing into the black rear diffuser that we have here. But still something was giving me the ick. And actually what it turned out to be was the front splitter. I actually downgraded this to the black one rather than having the carbon one on the front. I think from looking at it from the side of the car and seeing a carbon front splitter, then moving into a black side skirt and a black rear diffuser, it just didn't look right. But now I think it works a lot better, even though it is a bit of a downgrade. But that doesn't mean I got rid of the rest of the carbon. Everything from the front wing upwards is all carbon, like the carbon mirrors and then also the carbon massive bonnet vents that it's got. And what a final product. Well, it's not quite final just yet, but we've got a few more videos for that. I received the logbook for the Aston Martin the other day, and it turns out I'm the second owner. And to be honest, I think that was a bit of a relief for the Aston because the previous owner did this to it. Then you guys have been watching me over the past few months rebuild this thing, source parts for this thing, and then finally get it back on the road. But today we're going to find out how good of a job I actually did because Aston Martin are about to assess it. What a build this has been. I've thoroughly enjoyed all of it. But today we find out whether I did everything properly. This has got to be the best all-round car that I have ever owned. And so it should be. This is basically a £100,000 car. And it only cost me just under £17,000 to repair it. But how much did it cost you to buy the car? Well, you'll have to go back and watch the first video for that. Or just click in the top right-hand corner. Now, despite the car costing around £17,000 to repair, I reckon we could have done this a lot cheaper. But we bought a lot of unnecessary parts like the carbon fibre wing mirrors, the carbon fibre wings, and these huge bonnet vents. But it looks awesome. But there is one thing missing off this list, and it's something that I do to all the crash damage cars that I buy before I take them out on the road. And that thing is servicing them, and that can actually be quite an expense. But luckily, I don't actually have to pay for this or do this myself on the Aston Martin. Now, if you guys remember when we was replacing the dashboard, we went to Aston Martin to pick up the passenger side airbag. And whilst we were there, they mentioned that this car was bought with a service plan. And that service plan stays with the car. And it's only had one service so far, so we'll be taking it for its next one for free. So not only are Aston Martin going to be checking over my repairs, we're also going to be getting a service, which is technically free. But before we head there, there is one more addition that I've been dying to do to the Aston Martin ever since I put it all back together. And that is to get rid of this tremendous arch gap. Hello! Yes, the Aston sits pretty high, but that's not to say it rides bad, it just doesn't look great that high. But I have a solution to that, and it's inside this box here. Now these are KW adjustable springs, and these are going to sit on the standard dampers. That means we can kind of get the best of both worlds. We still have the adaptive damping system that we control by the little button on the steering wheel on the Aston, but also we have adjustable ride height, which we can do using this little C-spanner. I've got to be at Aston Martin at 8:30 tomorrow morning, and now the time is 7 o'clock in the evening. We better get these fitted. I'm not sure how hard this is going to be, as I've never done one before, but looking at it with the wheel off, it doesn't look too difficult. The whole damper and spring just sits by itself and is attached to the lower arm with one bolt. And then there's just the bolts on the top mount. So first thing I'm going to undo is the bolt connecting the damper to the lower arm at the bottom. And once that's undone, I can lower the car down and start undoing the top mount bolts. There's of course an electrical connector for the damper which controls the stiffness of it. I've got to unplug that, and to get to all the top mount bolts I've got to undo the strut brace just enough so I can get my ratchet underneath it. And then I could try and wiggle out the strut, but it didn't seem like it was going to come out. But now all of you can see the new Aston Martin Vantage tee which I'm wearing, which we've made limited numbers of. The link's in the description for one of them. So with me not being able to get the strut out just by undoing those few bolts, I'm going to start by undoing the upper wishbone, which is held in by 2 bolts. With that out of the way, I should be able to lift the strut clear. And I could. And with the strut and the spring off the car, I've then got to get the top mount off. And I can't just use a normal ratchet because this wire with the electrical connector on was in the way. So I'm going to have to use a swan neck spanner to get inside the bolt, which is in the top mount, and undo it. The problem is, my swan neck spanner wasn't thin enough, so I had to make a few modifications to my tools here. After I've made a few modifications to my swan neck spanner, I can then use the spring compressor to, of course, compress the spring, making it then safe for me to undo the top mount with my newly adjusted swan neck spanner. Continuing on with the front suspension. To get all the new KW kit on, I've got to knock the standard spring seat off the damper. Once I've done that, I've then got this adjustable spring seat to pop on the damper, and then I can start building it back up again. First off goes the new spring, which is a lot shorter than the standard one. Then goes a dust cover, a shortened bump stop, another spring seat, a helper spring, another spring seat, and the top mount. And then the old top mount bolt, tightened up with my newly adjusted swan neck spanner. And then we're ready to mount it all back up to the car. We have to do a massive shout out to DTB Motorsport for getting me these KW springs, as he managed to get me them at quite a nice price. Cheers, Dave. Now, of course, refitting them is just exactly the same as taking them apart, but in reverse. Making sure when we tighten all the bolts up, we preload the suspension to save any unnecessary wear to those bushes. And there we go, one front done. Moving on to the rear. The rear suspension is pretty similar to the front suspension. The spring sits on the damper just like the front. There's one bolt holding the damper to the car at the bottom just like the front as well. I'm going to have to remove a drop link just to move it out the way. And to get to the top mount bolts, I've got to open the boot, remove a little bit of carpet out the way, and then I can then access the 3 bolts, which are of course the top mount bolts. Not forgetting to undo the electrical connector first. With the top mounts undone, I can pull the strut away from the car, and me and Liam can start building up the rear suspension with the new KW adjustable springs. Job done there, time to reassemble. Right, the springs, the adjustable KW springs are on. They're looking mint. We don't really know exactly what the height is going to be just yet, but we've got them on the absolute lowest setting. Hopefully we can get off the ramp. Now, I am aware the standard wheels do sit pretty far inside the arch, so we have a solution. Now, if you've watched the previous builds, I normally change the alloys, but with these alloys being so lightweight and the tyres being specially made for the Aston Martin ones, I feel like and they look good as well. I'm keeping them, but as I mentioned, they sit pretty far inside the arch, and Aston Martin have a strange wheel PCD, so I couldn't buy spacers just off the internet. Now, Wheelmania, although they haven't provided us wheels for this build, they have provided us with a solution, and that solution is wheel spacers, because I could not find them anywhere. 5x128, I think the PCD was for these Aston Martins. So if I'm right in saying I'm probably the only person to own wheel spacers with this size on. Only Aston Martin, specially made from Wheelmania. Let's get these on, and we'll see what they look like when this car's lowered down and wide. Let's do it. Who would have thought it? Not only have Wheelmania provided me with some amazing wheels in the past, they're now making the stock wheels look even better than before with these hub-centric spacers. These spacers bolt onto the actual hub, and you may notice that the bolts are protruding, but they should sit nicely inside the cutouts on the back of the standard Aston Martin wheel. Now, I can't quite remember the exact size I told Wheelmania to do these wheel spacers, but if one of you guys are watching and have got an Aston Martin exactly like mine, feel free to contact them with the link in the description. Okay, we're just going down now. Wheel spacers are on, coilovers are on. Is it going to be on the floor, or is it going to be a nice, respectable height? Here we go. I feel like the ramp is... Yeah, I feel like it's going to be stuck in the ramp. Oh! Oh! Is it stuck on the ramp? I feel like the ramp's holding it up. I think the ramp's holding it up. But those back wheels... Jeez! The ramp's holding it up, so it could go even lower than that. That's looking absolutely banging on the front. We don't want to be rubbing though. We want nice fitment. So do we need to go on wood and then go back again?
Yeah.
I think that's perfect right now. That is literally perfect. I think I've got enough clearance there.
Might just be alright. Yeah.
But they've still got to settle in. They have still got to settle in. That is looking absolutely fantastic. Sensational stuff, and you know it's good because right now this did take way longer than expected. It is 1:30 in the morning, and at 8:30 we've got to be at Aston Martin in the morning. Let's go. So, the springs. After putting them on and then driving them out, they rode, I'm going to be honest, horrendous. The problem is with the adjustable springs on the standard shocks, as soon as you go a little bit lower, you lose a lot of play in that damper. So it almost felt as if I was running on the bump stop. So now, it is lower, but it's enough that it doesn't break my back. And yeah, any more lower, I think... Yeah, you're just on the bump stops, but I still think now, with those spaces and that ride height, that is perfect. Let's head into Aston Martin. Here we go. It's Judgment Day. This is Jake, and Jake is the service advisor at Aston Martin. We have to thank Jake already because he's been helping me throughout this Aston Martin build. And to be honest, all of Aston Martin have been great during this build, even if they didn't sell me some of the parts that I needed. I don't know, maybe they were just jealous that I didn't buy my car at list price. But hey, here it is, my crash damaged Aston Martin Vantage inside Aston Martin Nottingham main dealer. Who would have thought it? This workshop is immaculate. We've got James the technician taking care of my Vantage today, and he's also going to be inspecting some of my repairs. But first off, we're onto the service and we're going to be removing the air filters. He's already got the new filters set aside, and you can see here my old ones are pretty discoloured and worn. But I think so far James was pretty impressed with the rebuild and even gave me a compliment.
Amazing. Really, in all honesty.
Oh, thanks, but but the compliment was quickly dismissed when he noticed I was missing some rubber mounts for the top of my radiator. So that's what those things were sitting on my toolbox for the past couple of weeks. But hey, we can't all be perfect. After the air filters were in, James put the car up in these really posh ramps and started checking over more of it. And then moved on to removing the oil filter, which for once on the Aston Martin was in a really clever place, right at the bottom of the engine where it should be. And with the oil filter removed, he then can begin to remove the drain plug to drain all the oil out the engine. Whilst doing the inspection, he noticed I was missing a little rubber stop, which was on the boot, which is apparently pretty common, and I wouldn't have even noticed that. But he said those little rubber stops are £5 each from Aston Martin. And with the new oil filter in and the drain plug tightened up, James then started filling the engine with oil using this pretty cool machine here, which you can type in how many litres wants to go into the engine and get it exactly right. After that, he plugged in his diagnostic tool and ran the car for fault codes. Have we just got any, is there any?
Nothing.
Nothing?
Nothing.
Wow. Wow.
Near at the bottom. Nothing's back.
Brilliant.
You actually fixed the car.
Would you believe it? No fault codes using the genuine Aston Martin computer.
All in all,
it's all
it's
good.
not a bad car at all.
And you heard it there, an Aston Martin technician giving it the approval. I'm completely gobsmacked. Who would have thought it? But now we've got more jobs to get on with. So with the service and the health check done, and we have the wheel spacers and the lowering springs on as well, it's only right whilst we're here to get this on the four-wheel alignment, because we would have completely put out the whole wheel alignment of the car by lowering it and making it wider. But they have mentioned that this is set up for a standard Vantage, but they'll do their best. So we're going to sort out the camber, the alignment and everything. But so far, so good. This is really cool. To get this to be as accurate as possible, you need a full tank of fuel and 37.5 kilos in each seat in the car. That way, when James does the alignment, the car should be set up perfectly for when a driver and passenger are sat in the car. It's crazy the little details Aston Martin take. And it's definitely a good job we're doing this, because after the computer took the readings, you can see the wheel alignment was completely out. But that's unsurprising. This car was in a pretty bad knock. Another thing I wasn't quite satisfied about was my panel alignment. I couldn't work out whether it was too big or too small. So James told me to go and have a look around the showroom and check out the Aston Martins that they had there. And if I'm perfectly honest, I think my panel gap was better than some of the ones in the showroom. The panel line on this satin grey one looked really close towards the front wheel, but then opens up more towards the headlight. But I don't know, maybe I'm just a bit picky. And speaking of picky, Hannah went into the spec room where you can choose pretty much everything from colours to leather types and anything in between that you want when ordering a brand new Aston Martin. And turns out you can pretty much have any colour with any finish. So maybe my satin red wrap isn't as unique as I first thought. And whilst we were faffing around in the showroom, James was hard at work trying to get the alignment perfect. And it seems he was making some leeway, because here's my printout. Everything gone from all red pretty much to now all green and pointing in a straight line, exactly how we like it. Then it's just up to James to take it out, take it for a test run and make sure it was driving all well and good. So the tracking is done now and the car is driving straight, and we're just in for the final, well, it would have been the final thing, but the tyres could be an issue. But right now, the aircon needs regassing. The amount of times I've had this front end off and back on again, and obviously I've not regassed the aircon, and we're at the right place to do it. So James is going to crack on with that before finally finishing the Aston Martin off. So with us shortly going on a road trip in the Aston Martin, aircon is a must. But all was looking well. And Aston Martin have been great, even if I did buy a crash damaged one. These are the only things that came back on the report. There was small damage on the offside front wheel, there was some rusting on the exhaust tips, there was a front number plate plinth missing, very minor, and of course those radiator rubbers were missing. But other than that, look at all those green ticks. Can I call myself a mechanic yet? We did have a few ambers at the back, but those were for the tyres. I definitely need to replace them. And there she is, wheel aligned and aircon gassed, with approval now from Aston Martin. Wicked.
So full alignment, service covered under the service plan,
yeah.
Air conditioning regas.
Perfect.
So a total of 562 and 80. So in this pack, you've got a copy of the service sheet from today.
Yeah.
We've also got another copy of the four-wheel alignment sheet and a copy of the visual health check. But
yeah.
Nothing requires any immediate attention, which is
We're all good.
All good news.
It's shocking more
Did
than
you get
anything.
that bit on camera? Wicked.
Thanks very much then, Matt.
Right, thanks
Cheers.
for that. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks
Cheers.
everyone.
See you later.
Cheers.
See you
Thanks,
later.
James.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you later.
See ya.
So there it is, the Aston Martin has been checked over by Aston Martin and we've got the all clear. A few little things here and there, but now we've got aircon, forward alignment, we're a little bit lower, we're a little bit wider, and more importantly, we have the service stamp from Aston Martin as well. We are going to be going on a road trip in the Aston Martin next week. Okay, you guys need to listen to this. It doesn't sound so bad, right? The thing is, that's the sound of an AMG engine, more specifically a C63 engine. These new Aston Martin Vantages comes with the Mercedes C63 engine, as we've learnt through rebuilding it and finding all of the Mercedes logos dotted around, well, pretty much the whole car. The problem is for me, the C63 used to sound like this. So what happened? Well, turbos happened, 2 of them. And it went from a 6.2 litre V8 to now a 4 litre V8. But that doesn't mean it's slower. This thing is an animal. It just means the sound of it isn't as AMG or Aston Martin-y as I would like it. If for some reason you've completely missed this build, I picked this Aston Martin up, crash damaged, I've been rebuilding it, and in the past few videos, I've been starting to, let's say, improve it, in my own words. But today, I'm hoping to make some more improvements. So to make this exhaust sound better, we've got to replace and remove a few things. And one thing that I wasn't so impressed by, and I'm sure you guys will agree, is the size and looks of these exhaust tips. For a shouty sort of Aston Martin, these exhaust tips are pretty small and they're pretty pathetic. And not only that, they're rusting around the edge. And apparently it's a pretty common thing. Even here, it was noted down by the technician at Aston Martin. So I'm hoping we may be able to change them towards the end of the video. But first off, we've got other things to attend to. This is the exhaust of an Aston Martin. We have 2 downpipes going from each turbo, one this side and one that side. They then flow into the secondary cats. And then from the secondary cats, it goes all the way back to this horrible back box. Now the downpipes are going to be the part that is restricting most of the power of this car. Problem is, when I looked online for downpipes, I couldn't find any listed for Aston Martin. So I had to think outside the box. So in this box right here, I have a set of downpipes for a C63. Obviously, I couldn't find any for an Aston Martin. These are from BR Motorsport, and I'm pretty sure we should be able to tell within an instant whether these are going to fit or not. In my head, I thought same engine, maybe it'll work. But now I'm thinking about it, it's a completely different chassis. So let's get this thing back up in the air. After comparing the 2 downpipes, I'm just looking at them underneath the car. I couldn't really see much. So I only really had one option, and that was to start stripping it apart from the top of the engine to see if I could see anything more from there. There was a lot of things covering this up, like the strut brace, engine covers, and heat shields. I need to remove all of this so I can see the turbos and where the downpipes connect to them. And with that removed, it was kind of looking promising for me. I don't want to get too excited too early, but the downpipe that I've got and the ones which are on the Aston Martin are looking very similar. Here we've got the hole for the lambda sensor, another hole for the lambda sensor there. We have the same here, we've got the hole for the lambda sensor there and the one right down the back there. Now this route's down through the back and then it sort of comes around this route there, and if I look at it, it's pretty similar, and I'm going to be so miffed if it is the slightest difference. But I'm feeling positive. Let's all keep our fingers crossed for this because it will sound absolutely awesome, I'm sure. Let's do it. So it's back underneath the car we go, and I need to disconnect the secondary cats from the downpipe. There's 3 bolts holding the secondary cats to the pipe, and then there's 1 exhaust clamp holding it to the rest of the exhaust. then it's down with the Aston and I can start undoing all the nuts and bolts which hold the downpipe to the turbos. Once I've undone all of that, I then had Chris at the bottom of the car pushing the exhaust up and me at the top because I can't be two places at once. Yeah! We're out! That was an absolute mission and a half to get that out. That definitely went in with the engine, and there's no way Aston Martin put that in afterwards. This is the moment of truth. I'm going to be disappointed if these are not the same. That's the wrong side. Okay, let's get the other side. I'm going to be highly disappointed if we have to put these all back in. Please, it's too close to be the same.
It does look the same. It does look the same.
It's too close for it to not be the same.
But that means it might not be the same.
Yeah. Right, here we go then. Come on, it's looking close, lad. Oh no.
Tails off different, don't it?
Oh no.
Oh, no, wait.
Oh no.
Looks shorter here, doesn't it?
So, let's have a look right here. So that's on the angle there. It looks like the tail comes off. Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, where's this gone to?
And it only took another 30 seconds of looking at it to find out, yep, they were slightly different. That's disappointing. We wouldn't have known unless I took it apart because it looks so similar. And in my head I was thinking it's so similar not to be the same. Turns out it's not the same. Lesson learnt. But we have plan number 2 and it's in that box right there. In that box right there is a set of secondary cat delete pipes from Quicksilver. We know these are going to fit because they're made for the Aston Martin. Now when putting the downpipes back in, I may have made a small modification to them, making them now a zero cell sports cat, if you know what I mean. But along with the new Quicksilver pipes, this should be a recipe of some V8 carnage. That almost defeated me, but we're on. And now the question is, have I ruined the Aston Martin with this exhaust? Because I really do not want to put that all back together. Liam, start her up. Quiet. Little bit noisier. That's okay. That's fine, it sounds good. That sounds good. She sounded actually good. It's not even that bad. Bit more. Okay. Go on, one more, Liam. Wow. Okay, I think that's a winner, but there's still more we need to do. We cannot just leave it like this, obviously because of the new zero cell sports cat, so there's only one place we can go. So myself and the Aston Martin have came to Deutsche Tech, where of course they made Diamo's SVJ sound like this. And if they can make an SVJ sound like that, then I'm pretty sure they can make my Aston Martin sound a lot better. Now Deutsche Tech are known for making some crazy customized exhausts, and that's what we'll be doing to the rest of the Aston Martin exhaust. But there's one thing we need to address before we do that, and that is to tune it. This is needed before we continue with the exhaust work, because now that Aston can breathe better through the exhaust, the ECU needs to know that. And if we don't do it, it could potentially put it into limp mode, which is what we don't need, especially before going on a big road trip with this car. So as always, the Aston Martin is never straightforward. John has been slaving away at the Aston for most of this day now, actually, trying to figure out exactly how we can get round my special zero cell cat downpipe that I've made. And we've come up with a solution. So I'm actually going to be coming back here, and me and John, when I say me and John, mainly John, I'll probably be doing a little bits, and we're actually going to be making some custom downpipes for the Aston Martin, and then potentially touching a bit on the back box. But for now, John has actually tuned this car. We're looking at around 600 bhp this car's going to be now, so that's going to be absolutely ridiculous. All the power going to the rear wheels. This is going to be insane, and I can't actually wait to get this out and drive it with the new power, the new sound. It's all ready to go off now when we just on the final bits now, John is, and it makes a nice difference for somebody else to be doing the work rather than myself. Nice to have a bit of a break. This is what a 600 bhp Aston Martin sounds like. It's a lot louder. That is what an Aston Martin should sound like. So a massive thanks to Deutsche Tech. We'll definitely be back to sort those downpipes and exhaust tips out. But before I go and test out an extra 100 bhp, there's something we need to sort. And that was the tyres. In the last video, we took the Aston to Aston Martin to be checked over. And one thing that got pulled up were the tyres. And these tyres are specially made for the Vantage. So there's only one place I could go to get them. So now, 4 brand new sets of tyres. We can finally take this out for a proper test drive and test the exhaust and the new power. Let's go. Here we go then. New exhaust system, which is sounding mental. We'll get to that later. But a tune which should bring us over 600 bhp. We need to get it on the dyno to confirm that, so I'm sure we can head to Mallory Performance for that. But I've resisted putting my foot down until now, so we can all experience this together. New tyres on, 600 brake.
Not looking forward to it.
Track mode, manual.
Seatbelts.
Let's do this. Okay, that is a lot quicker.
I couldn't look.
And again. It has got immediate torque, and it just keeps, like, every gear it just gets faster. If you heard that. You're driving.
Why?
Because if we're going on the road trip, you've got to learn how to drive it. So it's now Hannah's turn to unleash the Aston Martin V8.
Do you feel safe?
I'm not quite sure actually. Go on then. Go on, give it a bit. Whoa! Jesus, okay.
Okay, I don't want to do it again.
It's fast, isn't it?
That's enough. No, Carabin.
She's alive. It's literally a new life into the Aston Martin. Some people see cars as just a machine which gets them from A to B, but this one is so much more, especially now. Every single thing that I've done to this Aston Martin, from rebuilding her to modifying her to the exhaust and now the tune on it, has just turned it into an incredible monster. And we need to have a little recap on this. So Hannah, we're going to demonstrate to everyone the final result. So let's go on sport mode. That is just the normal mode with the valves shut. Yeah, it's quite nice and quiet. Let's flip it into track mode. An instant difference. Okay, back into sport. Let's have a few revs in sport. Oh, it's still quite loud. Now track mode. This is where it gets hectic. Send it. She is well and truly alive. I cannot wait to go back to Joystick to do the back boxes, and we'll probably make a new downpipe as well. Who knows? But if it sounds anything better than that, it's just going to be new levels. Now remember, you guys, if you want to continue supporting the Aston Martin build, we've made a limited number of these Aston Martin t-shirts with a print on the back. We've improved the quality, the prints and everything, and they're looking so good now with the oversized fitment. I'm wearing a large. You can grab these with a link in the description box below. And remember, there's only a limited number available. This is it, the 2 final pieces left to rebuild the Aston Martin. Wait. Let's take it back a second. 3 months ago, I took the biggest risk I've ever taken by buying a crash-damaged Aston Martin Vantage. I spent endless hours rebuilding it, cross-referencing parts from other cars, modifying it, and then getting the all clear from Aston Martin.
All in all,
it was all good.
Not a bad car at all.
And now we're about to attempt a 2,500 mile road trip. Are you feeling confident?
Is it done?
It's done. The plan? To head from Leicester in the United Kingdom to a place called Portofino in Italy. But we won't be taking the direct route. We'll be stopping at a fair few landmarks along the way for reasons you'll see throughout the trip. That's if we make it. Now, me and Hannah won't be doing this trip alone. We've got Chris Slicks, who's taken his Aston Martin Vantage, which was also crash damaged. And then we have Jack McNeil, who's taken his turbocharged 1 litre Micra, better known as Boris. A recipe for disaster? Maybe. But regardless of what car we were driving, we all got on the road and headed down to Portsmouth, where we boarded the overnight ferry to our first destination in France, Saint Malo. Chris, show me your key.
Why are you trying to flex my key? No, just because mine's a real Aston Martin and not a Mercedes, you know, pretending. No. You don't need to. You don't need to.
So Chris has got a transit van key
with a Volvo fob.
Yes, a transit van key with a Volvo fob. I'm pretty sure this could unlock or lock a load of Fords.
Any Ford.
And this is actual genuine Aston Martin engine in this. It's
the real deal.
The real deal Ford Transit key.
Yeah, and Volvo fob.
Volvo, I think that's pretty reliable. AMG, I would say reliable. And of course, the Nissan, we all know them for their reliability, but maybe I'm speaking too soon. But maybe I didn't, because Boris seems to be eating up the miles as good as both of the Astons. We wasn't too far from our first destination, and it wasn't long until we ran into some really bad weather. Oh, I can't see anything! Oh my god! But rain or shine, we powered through it. And all the cars seem to be soaking it up so well so far. That was carnage. And it wasn't long until blue skies were ahead, the roads dried up, and we reached our first destination, Le Mans. Le Mans, the home of the 24-hour race. Did you know in 2020, Aston Martin Vantage took 5 out of 8 wins here, taking home
the trophies.
The trophies. We made it to Le Mans. And the cool thing about this, you can drive the circuit. Well, at least parts of it. I'm not sure what actual corner we're on, but this is actually part of the road, which is mental. And then here's the gravel. After driving endless motorway miles already, it was nice to get our foot down a bit in all of the cars. Being that we're at a racetrack, and that last time was at a racetrack, we had a little sound test between the 350Z and the Gallardo.
I think the 350Z won that.
I think we should do sound test Mark 2 versus...
Should we find a good spot to do it?
Yeah.
Let's go explore the track. We're going to find somewhere good to do the sound test.
Yeah.
And we'll check back.
We continued exploring and driving all 3 cars, having so much fun. Maybe too much fun. But then we found the perfect place for a sound test.
It's okay, it's okay, but it's a bit fake, isn't it? It's those turbos.
Right.
It just sounds a bit naff.
Here we go, NAV8.
It's a lot quieter.
Okay. And how could we leave Boris out of this? Time for his sound test. I'm waiting for a bottom end. We've got a clear winner. Okay, so we got a little sidetracked and we needed to get back on the road because you see, we were still here in Le Mans and the next main destination was Monaco, where of course we needed to get redemption from the last video. But all of a sudden, Jack seems to have a few issues with Boris's gear linkage.
I think what's happened is the bolts come loose or off, and it's basically when I was building it, I put the bolt in the wrong way around, and it had the exact same feeling as this. It wouldn't go into gear because the bolt was blocking it from going into gear. So we needed Jack. I don't know where Jack is.
I don't know if people would have had money on it, what car would probably break down first, but...
This car's not broken down yet, alright?
Okay, it's got a small issue.
It decides what gear it wants to go in.
So what, it can't go into gear? Is it all floppy?
Well, no, it can, but it's like stiff. It's like...
I told you, try cheap.
Oh yeah, just...
The samurai sword for a bread knife.
Yeah, bread knife might do it. Jack managed to temporarily bodge something together just to get the gear linkage working for now. And as we were starting to run out of daylight, we checked into the first hotel of the trip in Oradour-sur-Glane, where we would stay the night and then tomorrow morning continue the journey. Well, you can tell we're not in Italy just yet. And it's a little bit dull, but we've still got at least another 2 more days of driving, but plenty more roads to get on the way. And I'm pretty happy to be back in the Aston. Now, whether we like it or not, all of our cars have a history that we cannot delete. Just like the next village we're about to pass through of Oradour-sur-Glane, which was invaded by the Germans in 1944. And we can see the damage that was caused by them because everything was left the way it was. Things were looking good for all of us that day, but that gear linkage problem Jack had seemed to come back up to bite him. So Jack is underneath.
The car's fine.
What's up with it? Just trying to... So...
Jack, I've got some news, mate. What?
If this was Top Gear...
Every man gets left behind.
Everyone go watch Jack's video if you want to find out what happened to his car. Me and Chris are gone. See you, Jack! Rules are rules. Me, Hannah and Chris continued on, leaving Jack around here whilst we powered through to the south of France. And seeing as we could go at our own pace now, we decided to test the difference between the two Astons.
The aspirated Aston and the turbo Aston. Chris is gone already.
And there's a fair bit of difference. The weather was getting better and so were the roads. We crossed the Malau Bridge, and if I'm right, this is the highest bridge in the world. We've literally not even touched anywhere near where we're meant to be going on this road trip so far, and I can tell you that this is definitely the best car we've ever taken on a road trip. It is so good. I want to just explain how quick and how good this car is at roads like this. Like, it's been awesome cruising, but when you come to have a slower car in front and you want to overtake, it does it. And there's, you have like ultimate confidence in it that it will get around that car with ease. And we've got it in track mode now. We've got track mode suspension on it as well. And we'll just demonstrate how quickly it overtakes a slower car in front. 3-car overtake. And that is how it's done. It's so easy in this, it's ridiculous. We stopped once more to fill up, and then we heard from Jack. Jack's run out of fuel. We didn't leave him, we were going fairly slow. Yeah, very slow, but I think Jack's incapable of following a sat-nav. We all have walkie-talkies in the car. The problem is Jack can't hear us because he has all of the windows down as he has no aircon. His fuel tank is half the size of the Aston's, and a wrong turn left him stranded by the side of the road.
Hello, my friend.
What happened, mate?
So I went to the roundabout, and obviously because you guys ditched me, I had no clue where to go.
What? We literally went slow.
And I went around and roundabout like 3 times, like, wait, which one's the second exit again? I was like, I think it's this one. And then, yeah, it wasn't that one.
I just want to show you something. Nice full tank I've got there.
Oh, it's actually, you know, it's weight saving when you have no petrol.
Jack was back, and now he could join us for the drive along the south of France towards Monaco. The roads were incredible, the views were incredible, and we passed some amazing small villages that we never would have saw if it wasn't for this road trip. Saint-Tropez was en route, so it was only right that we drove through to check it out. And there was even people that recognised me from the channel there. It's absolutely mental. And as we was getting pretty close to Monaco, we wanted to give the cars a quick scrub over before arriving there. And how good does that Aston Martin look? It makes me smile from ear to ear. And a couple miles later, we arrived in Monaco. The hotels in Monaco are a little different to usual. You park up outside and then a driver comes to collect your car and he does the rest. The Aston Martin seemed to fit in quite well, but Boris on the other hand...
Keep going, keep going. Keep going. Oh my God, Jack. Look how you parked.
Where else did you want me to go?
You more coming, just those 2 plus this one.
That's it. Thank you.
Please put it next to the 765. Wow. He's done pretty well.
You've smashed it.
You've smashed it. I'm not being funny, it's not an easy car to
The wipers are doing it for me. Monaco, the home of the famous Grand Prix. Also the home of the rich and famous. We did our best to try and blend in.
Stop at New Apollos, cop a Henny sour, and I'm puffing Jack sour. Yeah, I feel a black power. Yeah, this time is really ours. It's time to get the bag. Yeah, it's time to get the bag. Yeah. Dollars coming, let me see it. Multi-million, I'm a bid on the mission. Best believe it. Ask for it, you receive it. Dollars coming, let me see it. Multi-million, I'm a bid on the mission. Best believe it. Ask for it, you receive it.
But we didn't come here in an attempt to try and blend in, and we'll get onto why we came here later. But the next morning, as we was driving around enjoying the sights of Monaco, I bumped into someone, or should I say something, which was so unexpected. And what are the chances of this? My old BMW M4 has also made it to Monaco, and the new owner is right here. How are you finding it?
It's great. It is excellent. It is excellent.
What a car. Oh, it's so good to see it again. Yes, I do. And it's still got the key tag.
Still got that, the money
Absolutely mint. Look what a throwback. It's a money pit. Is it still a money pit?
Correct.
Wow, this is a different steering wheel. You picking up some... No way. I remember this car being ridiculously loud. Jesus. Oh, we're gonna get kicked out.
Oh, it's open now, it's opened up.
The valves have definitely opened out. Alright, I'm giving it one blap and then we're gonna get kicked out.
Blap. 3, 2, 1. Okay, that's it.
Okay, that is loud. That is loud.
On a mission, best believe it, ask for a
The M4 was so cool to see again back on the road. It's like being reunited with a long lost child. Makes me so proud. But that's not the reason we came here. So last time we gambled €1,000 at the Monte Carlo casino. That was the total fuel cost that it cost us in the Lamborghini to get here, and we lost. This time we've came for redemption.
Let's go.
The famous Monte Carlo casino. As I've mentioned, it took us for €1,000 before in the previous video, and we're here to get it back. Or could this be the worst idea I've ever had? Again, parking outside the casino is another ordeal in Monaco. In their own words, they only let supercars park out the front. Every time I've bought one of my crash damaged cars, we've managed to get it outside. And this time, both of the Astons got at the front, but what about Boris? He got denied, he got denied. No. Oh no! Oh no! Oh, Boris! Jack had to drive back to the hotel and then walk back up to meet us. But look at that, 2 Aston Martins parked outside the front, both of which were crash damaged. Little does anybody know. Right, this is it. There's we all know what it's like with filming in here, so we'll get what we can. Hopefully, even if we get the audio of this. Good luck, boys.
We're good. We've got this. We're gonna win. No drama.
We're gonna win. So here we are on the secret camera inside the casino. Last time €1,000 went on black. This time, I'm going for red. If we win, we'll get our money back from last time. If we lose, we're down a total of €2,000. So we're looking for a red number. Here goes nothing. We are never going back in that casino. I lost. So the next morning, we said goodbye to Monaco and we headed along the coast to the destination we originally set out for, Portofino in Italy.
C'è la luna in mezzo mare, mamma mia, mamma di dare. Figli mie, cutte dare, mamma mia, pensaci tu.
Now the thing is, I saw some incredible photos of Portofino online before we went on this trip. But what I didn't see was the roads. Oh god, holy fucking shit, this is not cool. Trailers are coming through, Land Rovers. The road's about enough width for a flipping sausage.
too low. Get over as far as you can. What's the point beeping?
I have no idea what beeping is doing because it doesn't move anyone on.
Straight.
We realised that the locals came up with a theory that if you beep the horn, it makes the car thinner. Oh my God. Stress. Literally, what's going to come next? A tractor. After we escaped the narrow roads untouched, we made it into the centre of Portofino. Well, all three cars made it to the centre of Portofino, and what a place Portofino is. But it's not quite, as we found out, a driving city. But there's only one place we can go where we can get driving roads. I'll be honest with you, my original plan was to end the trip in Portofino. But after spending months rebuilding an Aston Martin to take it to a place I couldn't really drive it, it felt wrong. So we got in the cars and headed 246 miles up through Italy to a place called Stelvio Pass. We stayed in a hotel that night and it didn't disappoint. It was like Stelvio was already putting on a show for us. Whoa. Good morning. Look at these views. Unbelievable, Jeff. Stelvio was in touching distance now, and this part of Italy was just breathtaking. I even took the passenger seat to take in more of the views. We are heading up to Stelvio's Pass, one of the best driving roads in the world. I've never been there, I've only saw videos of it. It looks absolutely amazing, and to drive the Aston Martin on there, it's going to be what this car was actually made for. Cannot wait to get there. Let's get there. Would you look at this? And we're not even at the top. How high are we?
6,700 feet above sea level.
Thanks, Hannah.
2,052 meters.
It's really here. These parts of the earth actually exist. Stelvio Pass. 15 miles of raw hairpins and solid driving roads.
Holy moly. Should we do it then? Let's go.
Let's do it. This is what track mode was made for in this car. This car is absolutely perfect for it. The brakes are good, The downshifts are better. And then we're into a hairpin. This was so worth it. All of the miles, all of the rebuilding, all of the work, the effort, the money that I put into this car is worth it for this moment right now. Even losing that money at the casino, this has been one hell of a trip. And to finish it off on this road has been, there's just no words for it. I didn't even think roads like this existed. We continued driving Stelvio Pass for the rest of the day, making most of the time that we had and making the most out of our cars. This also gave us time to think about all the memories that we created on this road trip, good memories and not so good memories. But the point is, it was the cars that brought us to this destination, the cars that brought us together, and the cars that brought us memories. So if you're watching this, thinking about going on a road trip with your mates, go and do it. It'll be the best thing you ever do. That was honestly one of the best things I've ever done. Maybe ever. The sun is just going down now over Stelvio Pass, and we're finishing this trip off with the smell of brakes and the sound of a cooling fan. Exactly the way that we wanted to end it. And what a trip it's been. It's literally been the best trip in possibly one of my best cars that I've ever rebuilt. It is such a good all-round car, and this is the exact reason why I push any of you guys to just go and follow your dreams. I took a risk about 3 years ago, leaving my job, and this is part of my job. It is absolutely unreal. And we've still got a long journey back in the Aston Martin, but we are going to leave it right here. What a trip. What a journey. If you've enjoyed it, if you've enjoyed this journey with us, hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button, and I'll see you in the next video.
I'm gonna go see
It's not a vibe. It's not a vibe.
Oh yeah.
Like a drug that I just can't deny.